When Maya returns to her small hometown after years away, the old streets glow with memories she thought she'd buried. Reuniting with familiar faces, she rediscovers warmth, guilt, and the fading art studio that once defined her dreams. Each brushstroke and late-night conversation brings back fragments of love and regret until shadows from her past threaten to undo the fragile light she's found. As secrets surface and forgiveness flickers between her and those she left behind, Maya must decide whether to run again or let the glow of memory and truth guide her toward healing and a second chance. The road back to Hawthorne had always been a tapestry of memories, woven with threads both golden and frayed. As my car rolled past the familiar bends and tree-lined avenues, the sun dipped low, spilling honeyed light across the quaint town that had cradled my childhood. But tonight, the light seemed different. Warmer, yes, but alive, pulsing with a quiet energy that felt almost like breathing. I hadn't expected to return. Not like this. Not so soon, and certainly not with the weight of 2 years of silence and absence pressing down on my chest. Grace was gone. The man who had been my world, my muse, my solace, taken in a sudden accident that shattered everything I had believed about forever. In the years since, I'd wandered, searching for pieces of myself in cities that never quite fit, in canvases that remained stubbornly blank. But Hawthorne called me home. That was clear the moment I crossed the old wooden bridge, the lamplights flickering on, revealing faces glowing with more than just happiness. They shone with their emotions. A phenomenon I had once taken for granted but now felt like a secret language I'd forgotten how to read. As the evening deepened, I parked in front of the house where I'd grown up. The porch light flickered weakly, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the peeling paint. I stepped out, the cool air wrapping around me, carrying scents of pine needles and wet earth. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached for the door, the familiar creak greeting me like an old friend. Inside, everything was the same, yet tinged with a strange newness, as if time had folded in on itself. I wandered through the rooms, memories ricocheting off the walls, Grace's laughter echoing faintly. The brushstrokes of our dreams painted across the ceiling, the silences that had grown too loud since his absence. Night fell fully, and I found myself drawn outside again, the streets alive with their nightly ritual. People moved about, their emotional auras glowing bright fiery reds, soft blues, golden yellows each, hue a testament to the feelings they carried. It was a living symphony of light, a delicate dance of human hearts made visible. But then I saw him, Ethan Clarke, standing quietly beside his bookstore, his figure wrapped in a cozy sweater that looked as worn as the volumes lining his shelves. His glow was different, dimmer, a soft, muted flicker that seemed hesitant, like a candle struggling not to be snuffed out. I watched him from across the square, feeling a curious pull, an unease that mingled with fascination. Who was this man whose light refused to blaze like the others? What stories did he carry in the quiet spaces behind those thoughtful eyes? The night wound on, and I found myself retreating to my old room, the walls lined with sketches half-finished and memories half-lived. My own glow was barely perceptible, a faint pulse struggling against the dark. I opened my sketchbook, but could not find the courage to put pencil to paper. The grief was a weight, a shadow that dimmed the spark I once carried so brightly. I lay by the window, listening to the town's heartbeat, the gentle hum of cars, distant laughter, the rustling of leaves stirred by a cool breeze. Outside, the lights of Hawthorne whispered stories of connection, resilience, and hope. And somewhere in that glow, I knew, was the beginning of my own path back to light. Tomorrow, I would seek answers. For now, I watched the night, with hearts alight all around me, and mine flickering, waiting for its moment to shine again. The moment the door of Maggie's cafe creaked open, a wave of warmth and familiar scents washed over me. It was the smell of roasted beans, sweet pastries, and a hint of cinnamon. A comfort I hadn't realized I'd missed so deeply. The hum of quiet conversations and soft clinking of mugs created a gentle symphony that felt like a balm to my restless heart. Sunlight filtered through the large front windows, soft and golden, mingling with the delicate fairy lights strung overhead. It was as if the entire room was wrapped in a glow that reminded me of the town's unique nighttime magic. Only gentler, more intimate. "Maggie," I called out, my voice catching slightly as I stepped inside. The years away melted away the instant I saw her. Curly red hair bouncing with each step, a bright smile that could light up the gloomiest of days, and that effortless warmth that drew people in like a hearth in winter. She turned, eyes widening with delight. "Leela Monroe, as I live and breathe, you're finally here." She dropped the rag she'd been using to wipe down the counter and enveloped me in a hug that felt like home. The world outside, with its weight of loss and uncertainty, faded for a moment into nothingness. We settled into a cozy corner, the worn wooden table etched with the marks of countless conversations past. Around us, the walls were adorned with artwork celebrating the town's glowing nights, paintings capturing bursts of color and light like fireworks frozen in time. I traced my finger lightly over a canvas featuring a cascade of golden sparks swirling around silhouetted figures, their faces alight with joy and sorrow alike. "I've missed this place," I admitted, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "And I've missed you." Maggie's smile softened. "We've all missed you. The town's been a little dimmer without you here." Her words pierced deeper than she likely intended. I glanced down at my hands. The faintest shimmer of light pulsed weakly beneath my skin, a pale echo of the vibrant glow I remembered having. Since Grace's passing, my emotional light had never quite returned to its former brilliance. "I want to paint again," I confessed, voice barely above a whisper. "But every time I pick up a brush, it feels like the colors run dry." Maggie reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "It's okay to take your time. Healing isn't linear, and neither is inspiration. Sometimes the light flickers before it burns bright." Her encouragement stirred something fragile inside me, a whisper of hope, a tentative spark. Later, I found myself sitting by the cafe's front window, my sketchbook open but untouched on the table. The evening sky deepened to shades of violet and indigo, the first stars twinkling faintly. Outside, the familiar glow of the town's emotional lights began to emerge, painting the streets in hues of soft blues, pinks, and golds. But my own light remained stubbornly muted, a dim pulse that seemed to retreat whenever I reached for it. I closed my eyes, the memories of Grace flooding back, his laugh, the brushstrokes we shared, the suddenness of our goodbye. The ache tightened around my chest, threatening to snuff out what little glow I had left. A subtle movement across the street caught my attention. Ethan Clark stood near the doorway of his bookstore, the shadows playing over his dark hair and thoughtful eyes. His glow was barely perceptible, a faint blue flicker that seemed at odds with the vibrancy surrounding him. Yet there was an intensity in his gaze as he watched the cafe, as if he was waiting for something or someone. Our eyes met briefly through the glass, a silent exchange filled with questions neither of us dared to voice. In that moment, his guarded presence felt less like a barrier and more like an invitation, a quiet promise that perhaps, in time, our dim lights could find a way to shine together. The night deepened, and I lingered at the window, my heart quietly stirring with possibilities. Maybe this town, with its glowing souls and hidden shadows, still had a place for me, for my art, for my healing, and maybe, just maybe, for something new. As I left the cafe, Maggie's words echoed softly in my mind. Sometimes the light flickers before it burns bright. And with that, I took a tentative step toward the uncertain but hopeful path ahead. Just beyond the edge of streetlight, Ethan's figure faded into the night. His dim glow flickering once more, a quiet mystery waiting to be unraveled. And so, with the familiar faces around me and the faint lights that refused to fade, I began to feel the first stirrings of a new chapter, one where the past's shadows might finally meet the promise of dawn. But the question lingered, as soft and persistent as the night's glow: could I truly find my way back to the light? The answer, I hoped, lay somewhere between the warmth of old friendships and the quiet watchfulness of a bookstore owner whose own light was waiting to break free. And as the town settled into its nightly rhythm, bathed in colors both bright and faint, I knew one thing for certain: this time I wasn't alone. The afternoon sunlight streamed gently through the large windows of Maggie's cafe, casting long, golden beams that danced across the worn wooden tables and the soft hum of quiet conversations. I sat tucked into a corner seat, my sketchpad resting on my knees, pencil poised but hesitant. The familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of cinnamon and baked goods, wrapping around me like a warm, fragile blanket. It had been weeks since I'd touched pencil to paper with any real intention, and even now, my hand felt foreign as it moved uncertainly over the blank page. My eyes flicked up occasionally, tracing the patterns of light and shadow that the late afternoon painted across the cafe. I tried to capture the way the light fell on Maggie's curly red hair as she moved behind the counter, her bright smile a steady beacon amidst the soft chatter of familiar faces. But no matter how hard I tried, the images in my mind were overshadowed by the memories that refused to let me be. Grace's laughter echoing in quiet rooms, the touch of his hand in mine during cold nights, the way his presence had once filled every corner of my world. Each sketch I made was interrupted by a sudden pang, the pencil faltering, the lines wavering like my own uncertain heartbeat. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the quiet envelop me. The emotional glow that usually radiated from within me was dim, flickering faintly like a candle struggling against a draft. In this town, light was visible, a literal glow that surrounded each person, pulsing with the vibrancy of their emotions. Yet mine felt muted, lost in the shadow of grief. A soft bell chimed as the cafe door opened, and I glanced up to see Ethan stepping inside. His dark hair was tousled just so, and his thoughtful eyes scanned the room before settling on me. The faintest shimmer of his usual dim glow seemed almost imperceptible in the warm light, but was enough to catch my attention. He moved with quiet confidence, ordering a coffee in a voice that was calm and steady, the kind of voice that could soothe without needing to say much. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, the noise around us faded into silence. There was a flicker of something, recognition, maybe, or an unspoken understanding that passed between us, fragile yet undeniable. I felt my heart skip, a tentative pulse beneath the fragile surface of my emotions. Ethan was an enigma, his glow always faint, hiding layers of pain and stories I was only beginning to glimpse. Yet here he was, near enough to touch, yet still distant, as if guarding a secret too heavy to share. Turning back to my sketchpad, I tried to capture the moment, the way the light softened around Ethan's figure, the quiet intensity in his eyes, the subtle warmth that spoke of more beneath the surface. But my hand trembled, and the lines were jagged, uneven, betraying the turmoil inside me. Outside the window, a couple laughed as they strolled down the street, their glowing auras bright and steady, a stark contrast to my own flickering light. The sight stabbed at my chest, memories flooding back unbidden. Grace's smile, his voice, the life we had shared and lost too suddenly. I pressed my fingers to the paper, trying to steady the shaking. The glow around me dimmed further, a shadow threatening to swallow it whole. But then, unexpectedly, Ethan moved closer, taking a seat at a nearby table. His gaze lingered on me, a quiet invitation, a silent reassurance that I wasn't alone. Neither of us spoke at first. The space between us was filled with things unspoken, pain, hope, fear, and the tentative beginnings of trust. It was in that shared silence that I felt the faintest flicker of light rekindle within me, fragile but real. "You're sketching again," Ethan said softly after a moment, his voice breaking the quiet. I nodded, unsure if I was more surprised by his presence or his words. "Trying to," I admitted, "but it's harder than I thought." He smiled faintly, a small, genuine curve of his lips that lit up his otherwise reserved expression. "It's okay to struggle. Sometimes the hardest part is just starting." His words settled over me like a gentle balm. I looked up, meeting his eyes once more, and this time there was a spark of something warmer in his gaze. It was the beginning of a connection neither of us had dared to reach for before, a fragile thread of light weaving between two dimmed souls. As the afternoon turned to evening, the glow outside deepened, painting the town in hues of gold and pink. Inside the cafe, the warmth of shared solitude and quiet understanding grew, promising that even in the darkest moments, light could find a way to break through. And in that moment, I dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find my way back to the light once more. The first time Jonas Reed invited me into his study, it felt like stepping into a different era. The room was lined floor to ceiling with bookshelves, each crammed with dusty tomes, yellowed papers, and photographs that whispered stories of generations past. The amber glow from the crackling fireplace threw flickering shadows that danced across the walls, creating a cozy sanctuary from the chill settling outside. Jonas sat across from me in a well-worn armchair, his silver-streaked hair catching the firelight as he leaned forward, eyes bright behind his glasses. "You see," he began, his voice a low rumble, "this town's emotional glow isn't just a whimsical phenomenon. It's the heart of our community, passed down through stories and generations. It's tied to the very soil and sky here, a living testament to our shared joys and sorrows." I listened intently as Jonas wove tales of love and loss, of moments when the light shone so fiercely it could blind, and times when it flickered, threatened by shadow but never fully extinguished. Each story was more than history, it was a mirror to what I felt inside, the dimness in my own heart reflecting in the flickering lights around us. The glow, Jonas explained, is a language of the soul. It reveals what words can't always say. And sometimes it's in the faintest light that the deepest stories hide. His words settled over me like a bomb, a gentle reminder that I wasn't as alone as I thought. The glow wasn't just a spectacle. It was a shared experience, a way we all carried each other's burdens and hopes. Later that evening, I found myself drawn to Ethan's bookstore, its windows casting a warm, inviting light onto the quiet street. Inside, the scent of old paper and wood smoke mingled, familiar and comforting. Ethan stood behind the counter, a soft sweater draped over his slender frame, his dark hair falling slightly into his thoughtful eyes. He had invited me for a poetry reading, something he rarely shared with anyone. As he began, his voice was low and steady, each word carefully chosen and delivered with quiet intensity. The verses spoke of longing and healing, of light emerging from darkness. I watched his dim, emotional glow flicker with each line, subtle but undeniably present. For the first time, I saw beyond the muted exterior, glimpsing the depths of his guarded soul. It was as if the poetry laid bare his fears and hopes, weaving a fragile bridge between us. My own glow, still uneven and hesitant, pulsed gently in response. After the reading ended, we exchanged a glance brief, charged with unspoken understanding. The dim light between us seemed to pulse stronger for a moment, a flicker of possibility in the quiet bookstore. Stepping outside, the town was alive with the evening's emotional glow. The streets shimmered with hues of gold, soft blues, and gentle ambers, a collective radiance that wrapped around everyone like a warm embrace. I stood there, feeling the faint stirrings of hope within me, a fragile light beginning to grow amid the shadows of grief. That night, as I walked home beneath the glowing sky, I realized that the stories Jonas told and the poetry Ethan shared weren't just tales or words, they were keys. Keys to understanding that even in the deepest sorrow, connection could kindle light. And maybe, just maybe, my heart could learn to shine again. But the question lingered. How far was I willing to open my heart to let that light in? And could Ethan, whose own glow had always puzzled me, find the courage to do the same? The night held its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. The bookstore was quiet, save for the faint creak of wooden floorboards and the soft rustle of pages. Evening had fallen, and outside, the town was bathed in the gentle luminescence that came from the emotional auras of its inhabitants. Lila sat near the back, the familiar scent of aged paper and coffee mingling in the air. Her eyes traced the dim glow that surrounded Ethan, who stood behind the counter, his gaze distant. She had noticed from the moment she arrived that his light never quite matched the brilliance of those around them. It was faint, almost hesitant, flickering like a candle struggling against a breeze. Tonight, something in the quiet between them invited a shift. Lila wrapped her fingers around her warm mug, summoning the courage to ask the question that had lingered in her mind since their first encounter. "Ethan," she began softly, "why does your light stay so dim?" He looked up, startled, then exhaled slowly as if releasing a weight he'd carried alone for years. "It's not an easy story," he admitted, his voice hushed. "But I want to tell you." He gestured to a small nook bathed in the soft glow of a desk lamp. They moved there, settling into worn armchairs, surrounded by stacks of books and the quiet hum of the town's night. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he gathered his thoughts. "When I was a boy, my sister Ella was my whole world," he began. "She was vibrant, her light was so bright it could fill a room. But she was sick, very sick, and she left us when I was still too young to understand what it meant to lose someone." Leela listened intently, the warmth she felt for him mingling with a profound sadness. "I think my light dimmed the day she did," he continued. "I've been afraid ever since of letting anyone get close enough to hurt me again." The weight in his words settled between them, yet it also opened a new space, one where vulnerability could exist without judgment. Lila reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against Ethan's, an unspoken promise of understanding. Just then, the bell above the door jingled as Jonas Reed entered, his silver-streaked hair catching the light. He smiled gently at the pair, sensing the significance of the moment without intruding. "I thought you might be here," Jonas said, settling beside them. "The festival's coming, and there's much to prepare. But it's good to see you both finding your way back to light." His presence was grounding, a reminder of the community that surrounded them. each person's glow a thread in the town's luminous tapestry. Leela glanced at Ethan, whose eyes held a flicker of something new hope. As Jonah spoke about the history of their town's unique gift, Leela pulled out her sketchbook. Her pencil moved with a gentle urgency, capturing the subtle contrasts of light and shadow that danced around Ethan's aura. Each line was a testament to the complexity of pain and healing, to the fragile beauty of second chances. Night deepened, and the glow outside grew ever more vivid, but inside the bookstore, a quieter light was taking hold, one forged from shared stories, empathy, and the tentative steps toward opening hearts once more. "Thank you," Ethan whispered when Lila paused her drawing, eyes meeting hers with a newfound softness. "For listening, for seeing me," Lila smiled, a warmth blooming inside her chest. "We both have shadows," she replied, "but maybe together we can learn to shine again." The promise hung in the air, fragile yet undeniable, as the town's emotional lights pulsed gently beyond the window, a reflection of the healing beginning within them. And as the night wore on, Leela felt her own glow flicker not from sorrow, but from the first stirrings of hope. The evening air was cool but gentle, carrying with it the faint scent of blooming jasmine from the corner garden as Lila hesitated outside Maggie's cafe. She wrapped her paint-stained cardigan tighter around her slender frame and pushed open the door, stepping inside the warm amber glow that welcomed her like an old friend. The cafe was bustling with the usual chatter and the clinking of cups, but Lila felt like a shadow slipping between conversations, her own emotional light dim and flickering uncertainly. Maggie spotted her immediately, waving her over with a radiant smile that seemed to brighten the room even further. "Lila, over here," she called, her curly red hair bouncing. Lila managed a small smile, sliding into the seat beside her childhood friend. The familiarity was comforting, yet the weight of her grief still tugged at her heart, making her feel like she carried a darkness no light could touch. As Maggie chatted about the latest town gossip and the upcoming festival, Lila's eyes wandered to the entrance. Ethan Clark stood quietly near the back, his dark hair slightly tousled eyes thoughtful behind his glasses. His glow was faint but steady, a muted ember amid the vibrant auras that filled the room. Leela's heart stirred with a strange mix of curiosity and something softer, perhaps a tentative hope. Without a word, Ethan approached Leela's table and gently placed a small, worn book of poetry beside her coffee cup. His fingers brushed briefly against the edge, and their eyes met for a fleeting moment, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. Then he retreated silently, blending back into the warm shadows of the cafe. Lila stared down at the book, fingers trembling slightly as she opened it to a marked page. The poem spoke of light flickering in darkness, of hope kindled amid despair, mirror of the fragile glow she felt pulsing faintly within her chest. Her dim light, once dormant and cold, now stirred with a gentle pulse, as if Ethan's quiet kindness had breathed life into it. Later that evening, Leela found herself drawn to Ethan's bookstore, a cozy nook filled with the scent of aged paper and cedar shelves. She hesitated on the creaky wooden steps, the soft twilight casting long shadows over the glowing town square. Ethan sat on the top step, a worn book resting in his lap. He glanced up, a shy smile touching his lips, and began to read softly in a voice low and steady. His words wove through the quiet air, poems about loss and light, about the flickers of hope that persist even in the darkest nights. Lila listened, her eyes tracing the lines of his face, the subtle movements of his hands turning pages. The dim glow around her seemed to pulse in time with his voice, growing stronger with each stanza. For the first time in months, she felt her heart open, a fragile crack through which warmth could seep. Back in her small studio apartment, Lila sat by the window, the soft glow of the town's lights spilling in to mingle with the shadows. She held a brush hesitantly, staring at the blank canvas before her. The memories of Grace, her late husband, whispered in the stillness, threatening to overwhelm her fragile resolve. But Ethan's quiet support echoed in her mind, the shared moments of kindness and poetry lending her strength. With a deep breath, she dipped the brush into vibrant blues and warm golds, the colors flowing onto the canvas with tentative strokes. Her glow flickered uncertainly but grew steadier, a small flame rekindled within her. The act of creation was both painful and exhilarating, an embrace of grief and hope entwined. One evening, drawn by a restless impulse, Lila and Ethan wandered through the softly glowing town square. The emotional lights of their neighbors shimmered like stars come down to earth, a constellation of human feeling that wrapped around them in a tender embrace. Their footsteps echoed softly on the cobblestones as their glows mingled, faint and flickering, yet undeniably real. They walked side by side in comfortable silence, the night air filled with the scent of earth and jasmine, the distant laughter of children, and the gentle rustle of leaves. In that shared moment, unspoken but deeply felt, Lila sensed the first true stirrings of connection, a fragile thread weaving their hearts closer amid the lingering shadows. Though the path ahead remained uncertain, the flickers of light between them illuminated a way forward. Small acts of kindness, quiet moments of vulnerability, and the courage to face their pain together began to chip away at the walls they had both built. The town's unique gift, the visible glow of emotion, became a beacon, guiding Lila and Ethan toward healing and perhaps, one day, love. As she lay awake that night, Lila's thoughts drifted to the poetry Ethan had shared, to the soft pulse of her own light growing stronger. The darkness that had once seemed so absolute was beginning to break apart, revealing glimpses of dawn. And in the quiet, she found herself wondering if maybe, just maybe, the faintest flickers could grow into a brilliant flame. The light was fragile, yes, but it was there, and it was enough for now. Outside, the town's glow shimmered under the vast night sky, a silent promise of second chances and the healing power of connection. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Lila felt ready to take the next step, guided by the gentle pulse of hope kindled by a quiet bookstore owner's kindness. And as the night deepened, so did the light within her, flickering softly but steadily, a beacon in the darkness, waiting to be embraced. The warm glow of the cafe wrapped around me like a familiar embrace, a stark contrast to the cold weight that still sat heavily in my chest. Maggie's Cafe had always been a sanctuary, a place where the light of the town seemed to gather and pulse with its own quiet rhythm. Tonight that light felt softer, more intimate, a perfect setting for the conversation that awaited us. I sat across from Maggie at our usual corner table, the one with the chipped wooden edges and the faint scent of roasted coffee beans lingering in the air. Her curly red hair caught the amber light, flames flickering in every strand. Her smile, though still bright, held a hint of fragility I hadn't seen before. "It's been tough," she began, her voice low but steady. "Losing someone you thought was going to be part of your story for a long time. I never thought I'd have to face that kind of quiet, you know, the kind that sneaks in and dims your light without warning." Her words resonated deeply. I knew the feeling too well. The way grief could settle like a shadow, dulling the glow that once radiated so naturally. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, grateful that Maggie had broken the silence first. "I've been trying to find my light again," she continued, but it's like learning to see in the dark. Every day is a small step forward, and sometimes 2 steps back. She reached behind the counter and pulled out a small card, its edges worn, but the watercolor painting on it still vibrant. It was a tiny landscape, a sunrise breaking over a field of wildflowers, a symbol of hope, she said. I traced the delicate brushstrokes with my eyes, feeling a spark of inspiration flicker inside me. I painted this after the breakup, Maggie confessed. It was my way of telling myself that even after the darkest nights, the light returns. I want to believe that for both of us. Her openness stirred something inside me, a tentative hope that maybe I wasn't as alone in my struggle as I'd thought. For the first time in months, my glow pulsed gently, a subtle but significant sign that the walls I'd built around my heart were beginning to crack. We talked late into the evening, sharing stories of loss and the slow, uneven path toward healing. Outside, the town's emotional glow shimmered like a sea of fireflies, each light a testament to the resilience of human connection. At one point, I found myself sketching on a napkin, the pencil moving almost of its own accord, capturing the warmth of the moment and the fragile thread of hope weaving between us. The scratch of graphite on paper was a soothing rhythm, a reminder that creation was possible even amidst pain. "You're going to find your way back," Maggie said softly, catching my gaze. "You just have to let yourself feel it, all of it. The sorrow, the joy, the fear. It's all part of the light." Her words settled over me like a gentle tide, washing away some of the heaviness that had clouded my vision. I realized that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Maggie by my side and the town's glowing hearts around me, I was ready to take the next step. As the night deepened, our glows intertwined to flickering lights, finding strength in shared vulnerability. And for the first time since I'd returned, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, my light could shine again. The cafe door chimed softly as a late customer left, and I glanced around the cozy space, feeling the pulse of life and hope in every corner. Tomorrow was uncertain, but tonight, surrounded by friendship and the promise of new beginnings, I was ready to face whatever came next. And as I packed up my sketches and prepared to leave, I knew this was only the beginning. The path ahead might be shadowed by grief, but with every step, my heart's light would grow stronger, flickering, yes, but never extinguished. The night outside was cool and still, but inside me, something had shifted. The light was returning, and I was ready to follow it. The last light of day hung low over the quaint town, casting a soft, golden hue across the familiar streets I had once called home. It was as if the town itself was breathing in the quiet, holding its breath in that delicate moment between day and night. My chest tightened with a blend of anticipation and dread as I approached the edge of the lake. The place Grace and I had spent so many sunlit afternoons, dreaming aloud about our future. The cabin stood there, weathered but steady, its wooden frame wrapped in the embrace of climbing ivy and wildflowers that danced in the gentle breeze. My fingers brushed over the worn railing of the small porch, and the scent of pine and earth rose up to meet me, pulling me back to a time when everything felt simple and whole. I hadn't expected Ethan to come with me, but when he quietly appeared beside me, his presence was a balm to my raw edges. His dark eyes held a softness I hadn't noticed before, and though his glow was faint, it pulsed gently like a candle flickering in a draught. I felt a warmth spreading through me, fragile and new. "I didn't realize this place meant so much to you," Ethan said softly, his voice carrying the muted undercurrent of someone treading carefully. "It's beautiful." I swallowed, the knot in my throat tightening. It was home for us. For me, it still is, even if it's different now. He nodded, glancing around as if absorbing the memories etched into every corner. I'm glad you shared it with me. We lingered a moment longer, letting the silence speak, then turned back toward the town. The streets were beginning to glow with the evening's emotional light, each person's heart casting a gentle radiance that painted the night in hues of hope, joy, and longing. Yet, as always, Ethan's light was softer, more reserved, a quiet ember waiting to ignite. Back in his bookstore, he handed me a slender volume of poetry, its pages worn and familiar. "I thought you might like this," he said, a tentative smile breaking across his lips. I cradled the book against my chest, feeling the weight of the gesture. "Thank you." His gaze held mine a beat longer, and I sensed the layers of his guardedness beginning to peel away. We talked then, not just about poems or the town's curious phenomenon, but about the fears and losses that shaped us. With each shared word, the space between us softened. Later, we wandered under the soft glow of street lamps, our emotional lights mingling subtly. At the park, I stopped by the bench where Grace and I had carved our initials years ago. Tracing the faded letters, I felt the ache of absence, but also the gentle pulse of remembrance that didn't hurt as much as it used to. Ethan stood beside me without words, his quiet support steadying the fragile threads of hope weaving through my heart. That night, as I lay in bed, the town outside shimmering with countless lights, I realized something was shifting inside me. The past was still there, etched deeply, but maybe, just maybe, there was room for new beginnings too. And with Ethan beside me, the night didn't feel so lonely anymore. The glow outside my window softened into the early dawn as I drifted to sleep, dreams mingling memories with the faint spark of something bright on the horizon, a light I was learning to trust once more. The studio was quiet, except for the soft scrape of brush on canvas, a sound Leela hadn't heard from herself in months. She stood before the large blank canvas, the surface glowing faintly in the golden light of the late afternoon sun filtering through the window. Outside, the town was beginning to gather its nightly glow, emotions of the residents bursting into radiant colors that lit the streets like fireflies in a jar. But inside, Leela felt only a dull acre shadow, dimming her heart's light and extinguishing the vivid hues she once summoned with ease. She dipped her brush into a pool of deep blue paint, hesitating before touching the canvas. The strokes she laid down were uncertain, fragmented, as if her hand were remembering something it had long forgotten. The image in her mind was clearer, vibrant scene of the town illuminated by the emotional lights that everyone wore like a second skin after dark, but the colors on the canvas failed to match the brilliance she saw in her mind's eye. Instead, they blurred and faded, mixing into muted grays and washed-out blues. A sigh escaped her lips, heavy with frustration. "Why can't I make it come alive?" she whispered to the empty room. The door creaked open softly, and Ethan stepped inside, carrying a small stack of well-worn poetry books in his hands. His dark eyes, usually so reserved, held a flicker of gentle concern as he noticed the unfinished painting and the tension in her shoulders. "I thought you might need some company," he said quietly, setting the books down on a nearby table, "and perhaps some inspiration." Leela looked up, surprised but grateful. "I'm trying," she admitted, "but it feels like the light inside me is just flickering barely there." Ethan nodded knowingly and settled into a chair by the window. He opened one of the poetry books and began to read aloud. His voice was low, steady, carrying the cadence of verses that spoke of loss and hope intertwined. The words filled the room, wrapping around Lila like a warm blanket against the chill of her grief. As she listened, Lila felt something shift inside her. The dull ache softened, replaced by a fragile thread of warmth. Her hand found the brush again, this time moving with tentative confidence. The strokes became bolder, the colors richer, as if Ethan's words had breathed life back into her fading glow. Outside, the town's emotional lights flared brighter, a symphony of colors reflecting the collective heartbeats of the people. Lila glanced through the window, watching as the radiant auras mingled and danced, a living tapestry of human feeling. It was beautiful land, achingly distant from the shadow she'd carried for so long. Ethan's voice continued, weaving poetry and quiet encouragement. When he finally closed the book, Leela felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sorrow, but from the delicate hope blossoming within her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with newfound resolve, "for reminding me there's still light to find." Ethan smiled softly, his own dim glow flickering faintly brighter in response. As he left, Lila stood by the window, brush in hand, watching the glowing town below. Her heart pulsed with a tentative spark, fragile but real promise that even in the darkest nights, the smallest light could grow. She turned back to the canvas and began to paint anew, each stroke a step toward healing, toward rediscovering the vibrant colors of life and love waiting just beyond the shadows. And with that first spark, the night felt a little less lonely. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of early autumn as I stepped into the heart of the town square. The familiar cobblestones beneath my feet seemed to hum with an energy I hadn't felt in years. Around me, the townspeople bustled with purpose, stringing lanterns that shimmered with soft hues of gold and lavender, ribbons fluttering like gentle brushstrokes of light in the breeze. This was the week of the Emotional Light Festival, a celebration I had admired from afar in my youth, but now, standing here, it felt more urgent, more personal. Jonas Reed approached, his silver-streaked hair catching the sun's rays. He wore his usual neat button-down and held a clipboard filled with notes. "Lila, Ethan," he greeted us both, his voice warm. "Glad you could join. We have much to do." Ethan shifted beside me, his dim glow a steady pulse against the vibrant backdrop. "I wasn't sure about getting involved," he admitted quietly, but Jonas convinced me. I smiled, feeling the familiar tug of connection. "Me too. Maybe it's time." Jonas led us to his study, a cozy room filled with relics and photographs chronicling the town's rich history. The walls whispered stories of generations past, of celebrations where emotions were not just felt but seen, shared openly in glowing bursts of color. "The festival isn't just tradition," Jonas explained. "It's a reminder of our resilience, our collective heart." Listening, I felt the weight of my grief press lighter for a moment, the flicker of my glow dancing with the memories of brighter days. Later, at Maggie's cafe, the aroma of coffee and cinnamon wrapped around us like a comforting shawl. Maggie beamed as she placed steaming mugs before us. "You both look ready to take on the festival," she teased, her red curls bouncing with her smile. Ethan chuckled softly. "We're learning." Conversations flowed easily, the rhythm of shared tasks weaving a tapestry of trust and tentative hope between us. My glow pulsed gently, a soft light against the warmth of the cafe's walls. As twilight descended, I stepped outside, the town's emotional lights bursting into brilliance, lanterns, ribbons, and the collective auras of friends and strangers alike. For the first time in months, my heart's light flickered not with sorrow, but with a fragile spark of hope. The festival was coming, and with it, perhaps, a new beginning. But beneath the surface, I knew the coming days would test the fragile threads of vulnerability Ethan and I were beginning to weave. Would our lights burn steady, or would the shadows of grief and fear snuff them out before dawn? Either way, I was ready to find out. The night air was alive with possibility, and as I stood surrounded by the glow of my hometown, I whispered a promise to myself, to embrace whatever light I could muster and to let it lead me home. At that moment, the festival was no longer just a town event, it was a beacon for my own journey back to life, back to love, back to light. And the first step was right here, amidst the flickering lanterns and the hopeful hum of a community coming alive. The night had settled over the quaint town like a soft blanket, the usual hum of warmth and light weaving through the streets. Lanterns hung from wrought iron posts, their gentle flicker casting dancing shadows on the cobblestones. Leela found herself drawn to the quiet comfort of the little bench outside Ethan's bookstore, where the glow of the town's unique emotional light pooled in gentle waves around them. They sat side by side, a comfortable distance that suggested familiarity but still respected the fragile walls each had built around their hearts. Leela's chestnut hair caught the moonlight, strands falling loosely over her paint-stained shirt. Ethan's dark hair looked almost black in the night, his thoughtful eyes reflecting the soft luminescence that enveloped them. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was not awkward but filled with the kind of unspoken understanding that years of shared space, though not always shared words, could create. Leela's gaze drifted to the faint glow that danced around Ethan, a light that was usually so muted it seemed nearly invisible. Tonight, however, she noticed a subtle flicker, like the tentative first spark of a flame struggling against the dark. Ethan cleared his throat softly. "I brought something," he said, his voice low and steady but carrying a hint of nervousness she hadn't heard before. Curious, Leela turned to look at him. In his hands was a slender book, its cover worn but cared for, the edges softened from frequent handling. "Poetry," he explained simply. Leela smiled, the warmth in her chest growing despite the chill in the air. "I'd love to hear you read," she said quietly. Ethan nodded and opened the book with reverence, fingers trembling just slightly as he found the poem he wanted to share. The opening lines were soft, almost a whisper against the backdrop of the night. In quiet moments, light dances from within, shadows fall but never win. Hearts that flicker, faint but true, find their glow in me and you. His voice was steady yet intimate, every word imbued with a depth of feeling that surprised Leela. She watched as his dim glow, so often hidden behind a veil of reserve, pulsed gently with the rhythm of his reading. The emotion in the poem spilled over, a delicate bridge forming between their separate worlds of grief and guarded hope. When he finished, the silence that followed was thick but not uncomfortable. Leela's heart beat with a new rhythm, a hopeful pulse that matched the subtle light now blooming around Ethan. Tentatively, she reached out and laid her hand over his, the warmth of their touch sparking a quiet fire that neither wanted to extinguish. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, "for sharing that with me." Ethan's eyes met hers, the flicker in his glow steadier now, more assured. "I think I've been afraid," he admitted, "that if I let my light shine too brightly, it might burn something precious away. But tonight, with you, it feels safer to try." Leela squeezed his hand gently, the heaviness that had weighed on her heart loosening just a bit. "Sometimes," she murmured, "it's the faintest lights that end up guiding us home." As the night deepened, they stayed there together, their shared vulnerabilities weaving a tapestry of trust and tentative hope. Outside, the town continued to glow, a testament to the power of emotional light, the very thing that brought two broken souls closer, flickering steadily toward healing. And in that quiet moment, under the vast canopy of stars and soft lantern light, Leela felt something she hadn't dared to hope for in a long time. the beginning of something new, fragile but fiercely alive. But just as the warmth began to settle between them, a sudden chill brushed through the air, a subtle reminder that their inner shadows were never far behind. Would they find the courage to hold on to their fledgling light, or would the ghosts of the past dim their glow once more? The night was far from over, and the threads of trust they had begun to weave were delicate, ready to be tested. I sat by the window of Maggie's cafe, the familiar hum of conversation and clinking cups around me a distant murmur. Outside, the town was alive with its nightly ritual, a kaleidoscope of emotional light spilling from every home and heart. The street lamps cast golden pools on the cobblestones, but the true illumination came from the people themselves. Their auras shimmered in vivid colors, pulses of warmth and joy, sorrow and love. Yet my own light was barely a whisper against the dark backdrop of the night, a fragile flicker struggling to hold steady. The weight of the past weeks pressed heavily on my chest. Memories of Grace's laughter that once filled every corner of my life. The brushstrokes of our shared days urged unbidden, drowning out the tentative hope I'd been nurturing. Each recollection felt like a shadow, stretching long and cold, threatening to swallow me whole. I traced the rim of my coffee cup with a trembling finger, willing myself to breathe, to stay anchored in the present. Maggie's voice drew me back. "Hey, Lila, you okay? You've been quiet tonight." I glanced up to find her warm eyes searching mine, the curl of her red hair catching the soft light. Her glow was steady and bright, a beacon in the swirling sea of emotions. I wanted to smile, to tell her that I was fine, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded faintly. "You don't have to pretend here," she said gently, sliding into the seat across from me. "We all have our shadows. It's okay to let them in sometimes." Her kindness was a balm, but it also reminded me of how deeply I'd retreated into myself. I was afraid that if I let go, the darkness would consume me. I feared losing the fragile thread that kept me tethered to hope. Across town, Ethan sat in the quiet sanctuary of his bookstore, the scent of aged paper and ink a familiar comfort. His dim glow cast faint, wavering shadows along the shelves, mirroring the turmoil within. He turned the thin pages of a weathered poetry book, the verses resonating with the ache he rarely voiced aloud. He longed to reach out to me, to bridge the distance I'd put between us. But the scars left by his own losses made him cautious, reluctant to expose the fragile light he guarded so fiercely. Each attempt to offer support was tempered by the fear of rejection, not just of his feelings, but of the vulnerability they revealed. Back in my studio, I stood before a canvas half covered in muted blues and greys, the colors dull and lifeless, mirroring my spirit. My hands shook as I lifted a brush, memories of Grace swirling in my mind like a storm. The ache of loss was raw, a wound that refused to heal. Every stroke felt like a battle against the darkness that threatened to smother my creativity, my very soul. I sank onto the floor amidst scattered sketches, the silence pressing in. The emotional glow that surrounded the town's nights felt like a distant dream, something I had once been part of but could no longer reach. The fear that my light might extinguish completely gnawed at me, a shadow darker than the night itself. One evening, Maggie found me there, curled up on the floor with paint-stained hands and tear-streaked cheeks. She didn't speak at first, simply sat beside me, her presence a steadying force. When she finally broke the silence, her voice was soft but firm. "You don't have to carry this alone, Leela. Let us in. Let me in." Her words were an invitation, a fragile bridge over the chasm of my grief. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something warmer than sorrow, a tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find my way back to the light. But even as I took that first step, the shadows of the past lingered, whispering doubts and fears. Could I trust myself to be vulnerable again? Could Ethan and I navigate the fragile path toward healing without breaking? As the town's collective glow pulsed around us, I realized that the journey ahead would not be easy. Yet in the quiet moments between the shadows, I heard the faintest heartbeat of possibility, light waiting to be rekindled. The studio was cloaked in a muted silence, broken only by the faint scratching of charcoal on canvas and the distant hum of the town settling into night. Leela sat slumped on a worn wooden stool, her fingers trembling as they hovered over a half-finished sketch. The room smelled faintly of turpentine and old paper, a scent that once brought her comfort but now felt suffocating. Her chest tightened with a weight she couldn't shake, memories pressing in with relentless force. The soft glow that usually radiated from her chest flickered like a dying candle, weak and fragile. For months, she had tried to keep the darkness at bay, painting bursts of color to outshine the shadows of grief that clung to her. But tonight, the floodgates had opened. The image of Grace's smile haunted her, the warmth of their laughter now a ghostly echo. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to hold back the tide of tears, but it was no use. A sob escaped, raw and unbidden, fracturing the quiet. Leela. The soft knock at the door startled her, and she quickly wiped her face, desperate to mask her vulnerability. Ethan's voice was hesitant, a cautious thread woven through the quiet. "May I come in?" She hesitated, the instinct to retreat warring with a deep, unspoken need. "Yes," she whispered, voice barely audible. The door creaked open, revealing Ethan's familiar figure framed by the dim hallway light. His dark hair was tousled, and his thoughtful eyes held a softness that contrasted with his usual reserve. His glow, though faint, pulsed gently, a subtle beacon in the dim room. He stepped inside without another word, the air shifting as he closed the door behind him. Without asking, he moved to sit on the edge of an empty chair across from her, hands loosely clasped in his lap. The vulnerability in Leela's eyes stirred something deep within him, breaking through the walls he had built over years of guarded solitude. "You don't have to face this alone," Ethan said quietly, voice steady but gentle. Leela looked at him, the walls around her heart trembling. "I don't know how to stop feeling like this," she confessed, voice cracking, "like I'm fading away." Ethan nodded slowly, the dim glow around him flickering as if responding to her words. "I've been there, more times than I can count." She swallowed hard, surprised by the honesty in his admission. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it's easier to keep the light low," he admitted. "Less risk of getting hurt, but it's lonely." The air between them softened, their emotional lights beginning to mingle in a tentative dance. Lila's glow, once flickering faintly, steadied with a gentle warmth, as if Ethan's presence was a balm to her fractured heart. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping softly against the window pane. The sound was soothing, a rhythmic reminder that even storms passed, leaving space for renewal. They sat together in silence, the unspoken understanding growing stronger with each heartbeat. Leela found the courage to speak again, her voice steadier this time. "I'm scared to let go, Ethan. Scared that if I do, I'll lose him forever." He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, a small gesture heavy with meaning. "Holding on too tight can make us forget to live," he said softly. "Maybe we can learn together how to hold on and let go." The warmth between them grew, their lights weaving into a shared glow that defied the shadows lurking at the edges of the room. In this fragile moment, Leela felt the first real stirrings of hope since Grace's passing. It was not a cure, nor an erasure of loss, but a promise that healing might be possible. As the rain intensified, drumming a steady cadence against the glass, Lila rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. Their lights shone steadily now, a quiet testament to the power of reaching out, of breaking down walls, and the courage found in vulnerability. The night stretched on, filled with whispered confessions and gentle reassurances. And though the darkness still lingered beyond the window, inside the studio, two hearts beat in unison, alight with the fragile fire of new beginnings. But even as they found solace in each other's presence, the questions remained: would their newfound connection withstand the trials ahead? Could they both learn to trust the light within, despite the shadows of their pasts? The answers were still unfolding, like the slow bloom of dawn after the longest night. And so, with hesitant hope and trembling hearts, Leela and Ethan took the first steps toward healing, their faint lights growing brighter together, promising that even in the darkest moments, the glow of love and trust could never be extinguished. The night was far from over, and the journey ahead was uncertain. But in the fragile glow of that shared moment, Lila knew one thing for certain: she was no longer alone. The morning light filtered gently through the tall windows of my studio, casting long shadows that mingled with the soft hum of the town waking up around me. For the first time in months, my hands moved instinctively, as if the brush was an extension of the emotions that had been tangled and dormant inside me. The canvas before me was blank no longer. It bloomed with color, vivid, alive, and shimmering just like the glow that now pulsed steadily within my chest. I could feel it, the flicker of hope, the embers of passion reigniting. I had feared the well of my creativity had run dry, that my grief would forever smother the light that once danced through my art. But now, with each brushstroke, that fear dissolved. I was painting not just the town's luminous nights, but the quiet resilience that lived beneath the surface, the way the light bends and shifts, even in darkness. A soft knock at the door startled me from my reverie. I turned to see Ethan standing there, a tentative smile playing at the edges of his lips. His dark hair was tousled, and he wore a sweater that looked as worn and comforting as the bookstore itself. But what caught my eye was the faintest glow around him, warmer, more present than I had seen before. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. I nodded, stepping aside. He entered slowly, eyes scanning the canvas with a mixture of awe and something deeper recognition, perhaps. "It's beautiful," he murmured, voice low and steady. "You're capturing something I've never quite seen before, the way this town really feels." I smiled, feeling my cheeks flush with a warmth that wasn't just from the morning sun. It's been hard to find the words to say it, but the light here, it's more than just a glow. It's hope, pain, memory. It's everything we carry inside. Ethan moved closer, settling into a chair near the window. "I want to share something with you," he said after a pause, his gaze distant but sincere. "About Ella." My breath caught. His sister's memory had always hovered like a shadow between us. The reason his glow remained dim, a quiet sadness I had never dared to ask about. He spoke then, softly, of laughter echoing through sunlit afternoons, of dreams whispered beneath starlit skies. Each word seemed to kindle a light within him, the dim glow around his heart brightening with every memory shared. I listened, feeling a tenderness that bridged the distance between our guarded souls. The hours slipped away unnoticed until Jonas Reed arrived, his silver-streaked hair gleaming in the afternoon light. He carried with him the weight of history, stories of the town's origins and the mystical glow that had bound its people for generations. "The light," Jonas said, settling beside us, "is not just an effect of emotion. It's a living testament to our connections, past and present. It grows stronger when we share our truths, when we allow ourselves to be seen. His words resonated deeply, echoing the fragile trust building between Ethan and me. The afternoon waned into dusk, and the streets outside began to shimmer with soft, radiant hues, the collective heartbeat of our little town. We stepped outside together, the cool evening air wrapping around us like a gentle embrace. Our lights mingled, flickering and intertwining, a fragile but undeniable beacon against the encroaching night. "It feels different," Ethan whispered, his eyes searching mine. "Like maybe there's room for more light than I thought." I nodded, squeezing his hand gently. "There's always room. We just have to let it in." As we walked beneath the glowing canopy of our town, I felt the weight of grief loosen its grip. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time it was illuminated not just by the town's magic, but by the fragile, growing light of two hearts learning to heal together. And so, with the night embracing us, we stepped forward, glimmers of healing lighting the way. The late afternoon sun poured warmth through the windows of Maggie's cafe, casting a honeyed glow that danced across the wooden floorboards and the mismatched tables that had witnessed countless conversations over the years. The air was thick with the comforting scent of freshly brewed coffee, cinnamon, and the faint undertone of vanilla from the pastries cooling on the counter. Maggie sat across from Leela, her curly red hair catching the sunlight in fiery bursts that seemed to mirror the gradual strengthening of her emotional light. "You don't know how freeing it feels," Maggie said, her voice bright and a little breathless, "to finally let go of that weight I've been carrying. To let my light shine without shame. It's like I'm finally breathing again." Leela smiled, the warmth of her friend's progress seeping into her own heart. She had seen Maggie's glow flicker uncertainly for months after the breakup, a flicker of pain dimmed by resilience. Now the light was steady, even vibrant, a testament to the power of vulnerability and community support. "I'm proud of you," Lila murmured, her own glow pulsing gently in response. "It gives me hope." Maggie reached over, squeezing Lila's hand. "We're all healing in our own way, and that's what makes this town so special. Our lights aren't just for ourselves, they're for each other." The words settled between them, unspoken but deeply felt. Outside, the town was beginning to stir with preparations for the upcoming Emotional Light Festival. Lanterns hung from lampposts, their soft hues mingling with the fading daylight, casting a kaleidoscope of colors that seemed to capture the essence of the community's collective spirit. As Leela stepped outside, she noticed how the townspeople's glows had brightened noticeably. Couples walked hand in hand, their intertwined lights casting warm, golden halos. Children played in the square, their laughter ringing clear and bright, their youthful lights flickering with joy and innocence. The sight was breathtaking. It was as if the entire town was weaving itself into a living tapestry of light and emotion, each thread strengthening the whole. Her gaze drifted to Ethan, standing quietly near the bookstore's entrance. His dark hair was tousled from the breeze, and his thoughtful eyes caught hers for a moment. His glow, once a muted shade of blue-gray, now flickered with hesitant sparks of warmth. It was subtle, but to Leela, it was unmistakable progress. Later that evening, inside the book-lined sanctuary of Ethan's bookstore, the scent of aged paper and faint vanilla mingled with the soft glow of a single lamp. Ethan and Leela sat close, the silence between them comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. "I never thought I'd be able to let this light shine," Ethan confessed quietly. "After Ella, it felt like if I opened up, I'd lose more than I could bear." Leela reached out, brushing a stray lock of dark hair from his forehead. "But you're not alone anymore. We can hold each other's light." His glow brightened just a bit under her touch, a silent affirmation of trust and tentative hope. The next day, the town square was alive with preparation. Jonas Reed stood on the steps of the town hall, addressing a small but attentive crowd. His silver-streaked hair glinted under the morning sun as his voice carried reverence and pride. "Our emotional glow is more than a beautiful tradition," he said. "It is a reflection of our shared history, our collective grief, and our enduring hope. Each light you see is a testament to the strength we find in one another. As the festival draws near, let us remember that even the faintest light can grow brilliant when nurtured by community and care." The crowd listened, their hearts pulsing visibly in shades of gold, pink, and blue, a living mosaic of resilience and connection. Leela felt a swell of emotion rise within her, a mix of gratitude and anticipation. The threads of their individual journeys, her grief, Maggie's healing, Ethan's courage, Jonas's guidance, were weaving together into something larger, a communal tapestry that would shine bright at the festival. As she looked around at the faces aglow with hope, she whispered to herself, "We're ready." But beneath the surface, she knew the coming days would test their lights in ways they hadn't yet imagined. The festival was not just a celebration. It was a crucible for healing, for confronting shadows, and for embracing the unknown with open hearts. And in that, Leela found a spark of something new, a promise that even in the darkest moments, the light within could be rekindled, stronger and more brilliant than ever before. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the glowing town, Leela felt a quiet determination settle in her chest. The threads of their community, their stories, and their lights were pulling tight, weaving a story of second chances and the profound power of shared vulnerability. Tomorrow, the festival would begin, and with it, a new chapter for them all would unfold. The late afternoon sun filtered softly through the tall, narrow windows of Ethan's bookstore, casting elongated shadows across the worn wooden floorboards. The scent of old paper and polished wood mingled with the faint aroma of brewed tea lingering from earlier in the day. Ethan sat alone behind the counter, the usual hum of quiet customers replaced by a contemplative stillness. His dark eyes, usually so composed, flickered with a restless unease as they darted toward the glowing screen of his phone resting on the counter. The dim light of his emotional glow barely illuminated the space around him, a gentle but unmistakable contrast to the vibrant orbs that danced outside the windows as the town grew darker with the setting sun. His fingers trembled slightly as they hovered over the contacts list. There it was, his family's number, unchanged for years but heavy with memories both tender and painful. The weight of all those unspoken words, all the nights spent wondering if he could ever bridge the silence, pressed down on him. The fear of opening old wounds warred with a fragile hope that perhaps, this time, something might be different. A soft creak of the door pulled his attention away. Leela stepped inside, her chestnut hair catching the fading light. Her paint-stained clothes, a testament to the hours shed spent wrestling with her own emotions. Her expressive eyes searched Ethan's face, noticing the tension that had settled around his shoulders like a second skin. "I thought I'd find you here," she said quietly, crossing the room with a gentle confidence that seemed to ease the tightness in the air. Ethan offered a small, grateful smile. "I wasn't expecting company." Leela pulled up a chair beside him, her own emotional glow flickering softly, a beacon of warmth amid the dimness. "Sometimes that's the best kind," she replied. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated, then nodded toward the phone. "It's my family. I haven't spoken to them in years. I'm thinking about reaching out. But I'm scared of what might come back. His voice was low, vulnerable in a way that surprised even him. Leela reached out, resting a comforting hand over his. "Fear is part of healing," she said gently, "but so is hope. You don't have to face it alone." Together, they sat in companionable silence as twilight deepened outside, the town's unique glow beginning to shimmer around them. It was a quiet affirmation of the fragile trust growing between them, a bond forged through shared pain and the tentative promise of something new. A few days later, Ethan and Lila wandered the familiar streets under a canopy of stars, their emotional lights weaving together like threads in a tapestry. Ethan spoke hesitantly about Ella, his sister, the bright light, who had left too soon and left behind a shadow that had dimmed his own glow for so long. "I always thought if I reached out to my family, I'd only face more loss," he confessed, "that it would break me all over again." Lila squeezed his hand. "But sometimes reaching out is how we find the strength to carry on." When Ethan's phone buzzed with a reply from his family, the message was cautious but hopeful, a step toward reconciliation that neither had dared to expect. The light around Ethan brightened imperceptibly, a soft radiance that mirrored the growing warmth in his chest. He shared the news with Lila, their smiles reflecting the promise of healing and the possibility of brighter days ahead. As they sat together in the quiet of the bookstore, their emotional glows mingling and strengthening, a new chapter began to unfold, one where fear no longer dictated the boundaries of their hearts. The echoes of loss remained, but they no longer defined the rhythm of their lives. Instead, they became part of the intricate pattern of resilience, trust, and love that illuminated their path forward. Yet, as the night deepened, both knew that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with challenges and discoveries, where the faintest light could grow brilliant with care and courage. The question lingered softly in the air. Could they both embrace the vulnerability required to truly let their hearts shine? The answer, like the town's eternal glow, promised to reveal itself in time. The last rays of sunlight spilled softly over the rooftops of the town, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the cobblestone streets. From the small window of her studio, Leela Monroe watched as the first lanterns flickered to life, their delicate glow weaving through the trees and lighting up the faces of neighbors preparing for the festival. Despite the familiar warmth that spread across the evening air, a cold tightness gripped her chest, not of anxiety that twisted deeper with every heartbeat. She leaned closer to the window, fingertips tracing the cool glass as if it might somehow shield her from the vulnerability that awaited. The emotional light festival was more than a tradition in this town. It was a communal rite of opening, of laying bare what so often remained hidden behind daily smiles and polite nods. For Leela, who had spent so long cloaked in the shadow of grief, the prospect of bearing her flickering, fragile light to the world felt both terrifying and necessary. Her thoughts drifted to Ethan Clark, the quiet bookstore owner whose glow had always been a muted mystery. Alone in his shop, he sat hunched over a worn collection of poetry, the pages yellowed with time and edges softened by countless readings. His dim light pulsed faintly, a hesitant heartbeat in the dimming room. She knew he wrestled with his own fierce fears, shaped by loss and the long years of holding himself apart from others to avoid pain. Tonight, she hoped, might be the night he finally let that light grow. The air outside thickened with the scents of autumn cinnamon, wood smoke, and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting from Maggie's cafe down the street. The cafe was a hub of warmth and laughter, a place where old friends gathered and new hopes were kindled. Inside, Maggie Turner moved with practiced ease, her curly red hair bouncing as she moved between tables, encouraging smiles and sharing quiet words of encouragement. Lila stepped into the cafe, the comforting chatter wrapping around her like a soft blanket. She found Maggie wiping down the counter, her bright eyes meeting Lila's with unspoken understanding. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," Maggie said gently, sliding a steaming cup of tea toward her. Lila sighed, fingers curling around the warm mug. "It's the festival, Maggie. I thought I was ready, but now I'm not so sure." Maggie nodded knowingly. "It's okay to be scared. Opening your heart isn't easy, especially when it's been broken. But you're not alone. We're all glowing because we've found the strength to keep going, even in the dark." The words settled over Lila like a bomb, softening the edges of her anxiety. She took a slow sip, feeling the warmth spread through her, a small flicker of light rekindling within. Meanwhile, Ethan stood behind the counter of his bookstore, the quiet hum of evening settling round him. He ran his fingers over the spine of a poetry book, his thoughts as tangled as the words on the pages. The festival was hours away, but the weight of what it demanded pressed heavily on him. To open up to share his pain, his fears felt like stepping into a blaze that might consume him. Yet, beneath his hesitation, there was a growing resolve. Lila's presence, her tentative light shining despite her sorrow, stirred something fragile but fierce within him. Maybe, just maybe, he could let his own light grow brighter. Outside, the town square buzzed with energy. Strings of lanterns crisscrossed overhead, casting a warm golden glow over booths laden with handmade crafts and fragrant baked goods. Jonas Reed moved steadily through the crowd, clipboard in hand, coordinating last-minute preparations with calm authority. His silver-streaked hair caught the lantern light, and his glasses reflected a quiet determination. He paused to exchange encouraging words with the volunteers, reminding everyone that the festival was more than celebration, it was a shared act of healing. "Our lights shine brightest when we face the darkness together," he said, his voice steady and sure. Back in her studio, Lila paced, wrestling with the storm inside her. The thought of stepping into the festival's glow, surrounded by the radiant emotions of the town, felt overwhelming. Her grief, which had once dulled her light to a near invisibility, now pulsed with a strange Enargia mixture of fear, hope, and the aching desire to belong again. A soft knock at the door startled her. Ethan's voice, quiet but firm, came through. "Can we talk?" She hesitated, then nodded, opening the door to find him standing there, his usual reticence softened by something new, a flicker of vulnerability that matched her own. Together, they stepped into the evening, the lanterns above casting a gentle glow that seemed to wrap around them like a promise. The festival awaited, a night where fears would be faced and hearts laid bare. And for the first time in a long while, Lila dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, their lights could shine together. As the town's emotional glow deepened into night, so too did the fragile threads of connection between two souls learning to trust the light within. But the journey was just beginning, and the shadows of doubt still lingered, waiting to test the strength of their newfound hope. The lanterns flickered softly overhead, and the first notes of the festival's music began to weave through the air, a melody of light and shadow, loss and love, fear and courage. Lila took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her like a delicate veil. "Are you ready?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She met his gaze, her own light trembling but present. "As ready as I'll ever be." And with that, they stepped forward together into the night where hearts would be tested, and where even the faintest light could blaze brilliantly if nurtured with care and trust. The festival had begun. The evening air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine and the distant murmur of the town preparing for its most anticipated night of the year. As twilight descended over the quaint streets, the town began to transform. Lamps flickered on, casting soft halos of golden light, but it was the people's own emotional glows that truly set the night ablaze. Like fireflies in a jar, each individual radiated a unique hue: ambers, soft blues, vibrant pinks painting the town in an ethereal tapestry of feeling. Leela stepped cautiously into the town square, her chest tight with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Her own glow, usually a gentle amber when hope stirred within her, now felt fragile and faint, a barely there flicker struggling against the shadows cast by her grief. The memory of Grace hovered at the edges of her mind, cold and sharp, threatening to snuff out the fragile light she'd fought so hard to nurture since returning. Around her, the festival was in full swing. Children laughed and twirled beneath strings of lanterns, their bright lights mingling with their vibrant auras. Maggie waved enthusiastically from the cafe terrace, her own glow a triumphant quarrel, the result of months of healing and rekindled joy. Jonas was nearby, his silver-streaked hair catching the lantern light as he conversed animatedly with townsfolk, narrating the history of their unique emotional phenomenon. But Lila's gaze drifted instinctively toward the quiet corner by the little bookstore. Ethan stood there, dark eyes reflecting the myriad lights, his usually muted glow brighter than it had been in wicks a soft, steady blue that seemed to pulse with unspoken emotion. He noticed her looking and offered a small, tentative smile. She felt her heart stutter, a flutter of warmth fighting through the cold. Yet, as the crowd swelled and the music rose, a gentle melody woven from the hum of voices and the soft strumming of a guitar, Leela's glow began to waver. The weight of her sorrow pressed down like an unyielding tide, dimming the light she'd barely managed to rekindle. A sudden rush of memories overwhelmed her, Grace's laughter echoing in their sunlit studio, the feel of his hand in hers, the unfinished canvas on her easel back home. Her breath caught, and the amber flicker inside her nearly died. She pressed her hands to her chest, fighting the despair threatening to pull her under. From the corner of her eye, Ethan moved closer, his presence at once grounding and gentle. He reached out, brushing a strand of chestnut hair from her face, and in a voice low and steady, began to read aloud a poem one she'd heard him recite softly during quieter moments. The words wove through the night air, a balm for her raw edges. The light that flickers in the darkest night, he intoned, is the bravest light of all. Leela's fingers found his, their grasp tentative but sure. She let the words soak in, the warmth of his hand anchoring her amidst the swirling sea of light and shadow. Slowly, the cold retreating, her glow responded, pulsing gently, a soft amber rekindled. Together, they stepped toward the center of the square, where the townspeople had gathered in a circle, their collective light a radiant beacon of resilience and hope. As Leela and Ethan joined hands, their lights intertwined, his quiet blue blending with her warm amber, creating a shimmering swirl of color that drew admiring gasps from the crowd. In that moment, the festival transcended celebration. It became a testament to the power of vulnerability, connection, and the fragile beauty of second chances. Leela felt the grip of her grief loosen, replaced by a tentative but growing hope. Around them, the town's glow seemed to brighten in response, as if the very air hummed with the promise of healing. The night stretched on, alive with laughter, music, and the soft flicker of countless hearts alight in shared understanding. Yet beneath the joy, Lila knew the journey ahead was far from over. The shadows of loss would linger, But now, illuminated not by solitary sorrow, but by the light of a connection that dared to hope, she was ready to face whatever came next. The festival's magic wasn't just in the glowing lights or the stories shared. It was in the courage to shine, even when the night seemed darkest. And tonight, that courage was hers to hold. "Stay with me," Ethan whispered as the crowd's cheers swelled, their hands still entwined, "and we'll find the light together." Leela met his gaze, a smile breaking through the melancholy. "Together," she promised, "we'll keep our hearts alight." As the stars wheeled overhead and the town pulsed with radiant hope, the Night of Lights became more than a festival. It was the beginning of a new chapter, glowing brightly against the darkness. The bookstore was quiet, save for the faint rustling of pages and the occasional creak of old wood settling into the evening. Outside, the town's nightly glow shimmered faintly through the large front windows, but inside, a softer, more intimate light bathed the room. A single candle flickered on the small table between them, its flame dancing gently, casting warm shadows that flickered across Ethan's face. Leela sat opposite him, her chestnut hair catching the candlelight, eyes wide and attentive. She had never seen Ethan like this, so open, so exposed. The usual calm reserve that cloaked him like a well-worn sweater was gone, replaced by something raw and fragile. "I've always been afraid," Ethan began, his voice barely above a whisper, "afraid that if I let anyone in, if I let my light shine too brightly, it might just flicker out, that it would be snuffed out by loss again." His hands clenched tightly in his lap, knuckles whitening. Leela reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing against his. The contact sent a small pulse of warmth through her, a rhythm that matched the slow, steady glow beginning to form around him. "It's your sister, isn't it, Ella?" Leela's voice was gentle, not pressing but filled with understanding. Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. "She was everything to me when she died. It was like my light dimmed, and I've been afraid to let it grow since." The vulnerability in his confession was staggering. For so long, Leela had puzzled over his muted glow, the way it seemed almost to resist the town's usual brilliance. Now, she saw it was not a lack of feeling, but a fortress built from fear. "I thought if I could just keep it small, keep it hidden, I could keep myself safe. But it's lonely," he admitted, voice cracking slightly. "Lonelier than I ever imagined." Leela's own glow flickered uncertainly, the grief she carried still a weight on her heart. But in this moment, surrounded by the soft light of candles and the quiet hum of the bookstore, she felt something shift, a fragile thread weaving between them. "I know what it's like to carry a light that feels like it might go out any moment," she said softly, "Grace's memory. It's been my anchor and my storm. But maybe, together, we can find a way to make our light stronger, not despite the pain, but because of it." Ethan's eyes met hers, shining with new warmth. Slowly, the dim glow enveloping him brightened, flickering like a candle caught in a gentle breeze before steadying into a soft, steady flame. Lila's own light pulsed in response, their two lights weaving together in a dance of color and warmth. A silence settled between them, comfortable and filled with promise. The fears they had carried alone for so long now felt lighter, shared between two hearts willing to trust. "Thank you for listening," Ethan whispered, squeezing her hand gently. "Thank you for trusting me," Leela replied, a smile breaking through the shadows that had long haunted her. Outside, the town's glow seemed to brighten, as if reflecting the new light kindling within the bookstore. The night was no longer just a backdrop for sorrow, but a canvas for hope, painted in the intertwined lights of two souls daring to heal. As the candle flickered low, they leaned closer, the quiet warmth between them a promise that even the faintest light, when shared, could shine brilliantly. And in that shared glow, they found a beginning, second chance, bathed in the soft, enduring light of love. But even as their lights grew brighter, questions lingered. Could they sustain this fragile glow against the shadows still lurking? Would the past's weight ever fully loosen its grip? And, most importantly, were they ready to face what the future held together? The answers would come with time, but for now, in the quiet bookstore under the veil of night, Leela and Ethan embraced the hopeful vulnerability of their confessions, ready to step into the light hand in hand. The journey ahead was uncertain, but their hearts at last were alight. The morning light filtered softly through the wide windows of the studio, casting a gentle golden glow that seemed to dance across the scattered canvases and paintbrushes. Leela stood before her easel, heart steady but pounding with a quiet intensity. The painting stretched before her was unlike any she had done since returning. Homer vivid composition of swirling colors and light, embodying the very essence of hope and acceptance she had been struggling to reclaim. Her brush hovered for a moment, trembling slightly, before she laid down the final strokes, a burst of warm amber and glowing white that seemed to radiate from the canvas itself. The image captured the interplay of shadow and illumination, the delicate balance between grief and healing. It was a visual testament to the journey she had endured, the losses she had faced, and the fragile but undeniable strength of new beginnings. Breathing deeply, Lila stepped back and let her gaze linger on the painting. For the first time in months, her emotional glow flickered steadily, not dim, not uncertain, but warm and steady. It was as if the light within her had been coaxed back to life by the very act of creation. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. She turned to see Ethan standing hesitantly in the doorway, the early morning light catching the thoughtful lines of his face. His dark hair was tousled, and the cozy sweater he wore seemed to wrap him in quiet comfort. More noticeable, though, was the subtle change in his glow. Where before it had been faint and muted, now a gentle shimmer of light surrounded him, as if her own courage had begun to kindle something inside him. "I thought I'd find you here," he said softly, stepping inside. His voice was low but steady, carrying a warmth that brushed against the edges of her heart. Leela offered a tentative smile, the kind that spoke of shared understanding and unspoken promises. "I finished it." Ethan's eyes drifted to the painting, his expression opening with something like awe. "It's beautiful. It's more than that," she replied. "It's everything I've been trying to say but couldn't put into words." They stood side by side, the silence between them comfortable and charged with possibility. The weight of past sorrows lingered, but it no longer felt like a chain. Instead, it was a foundation, one that could support something new, something tender and hopeful. Slowly, they moved outside into the quiet streets of the waking town. The sky was a canvas of soft blues and pinks, the first light of dawn promising endless potential. As they walked hand in hand, their emotional lights intertwined, her warm amber melding with his gentle silver, casting a luminous glow that pushed back the lingering shadows of the night. Around them, the town began to stir, the emotional auras of neighbors and friends flickering to life like a constellation of shared humanity. Lila and Ethan's joined glow was a beacon, a sign that even the faintest light could grow brilliant with care and trust. They paused beneath an ancient oak, its branches stretching wide as if embracing the new day. Ethan squeezed her hand gently, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm ready to trust, to feel, to be here with you." Lila's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, not of sorrow but of hope. "I'm ready to." In that moment, Beneath the burgeoning light of dawn and the watchful eyes of their town, they stepped into the future together, two hearts alight, healing and intertwined. As the sun climbed higher, the colors of the world seemed richer, more alive. Lila knew that this was not an end but a beginning. The painting on her easel was more than art. It was a promise to herself, to Ethan, and to the luminous community that had welcomed her back home. And in the gentle glow of that new day, she finally felt whole again. But even as the light grew stronger, a quiet question lingered in the back of her mind. How much of the past could she truly leave behind? And what shadows might still await in the corners of the heart? The journey was far from over, but for now, with hearts alight and hands entwined, she embraced the fragile beauty of second chances. The dawn painted the sky with streaks of pink and gold, a silent witness to a love rekindled and a soul reborn. And as the town stirred awake, its nightly glow fading into morning's embrace, Leela and Ethan stood together ready to face whatever came next, their lights shining brighter than ever before. The morning sun slipped gently through the lace curtains of my studio, casting soft beams across the walls and floor. It was a quiet, tender light, nothing like the brilliant glow of the previous night's festival, but it held a warmth that settled deep in my chest. I sat before my easel, brush poised above a fresh canvas, and marveled quietly at how different everything felt. The air was calm, filled with the faint scent of freshly brewed coffee drifting in from the kitchen. My heart pulsed steadily, the glow no longer flickering uncertainly, but glowing with a soft, confident warmth. Ethan appeared in the doorway, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. His dark hair looked tousled from sleep, and the familiar cozy sweater he favored hung loosely on his frame. But it was the light around him, subtle, yes, but undeniably brighter than I had seen in months, that caught my breath. He carried 2 mugs of coffee, steam curling upward like tiny ribbons of hope. "Morning," he said quietly, stepping inside and setting a mug beside me. Our fingers brushed briefly, and I felt a spark ripple between us, a pulse of light that seemed to ripple through the room. It was a touch so ordinary, yet somehow extraordinary after everything we had been through. The vulnerability we shared the night before had woven a new thread between us, one that shimmered with promise. "Morning," I replied, voice soft. I took a tentative sip of the coffee, savoring the warmth as it spread through me, mingling with the glow in my chest. Outside the window, the town was already stirring. Neighbors greeted each other with smiles and laughter, their emotional lights blending in a gentle symphony of colors that shimmered under the pale morning sky. The festival had left a trace of magic in the air, a collective sense of healing and connection that lingered even as the lights of night faded. Maggie stopped by the cafe down the street, her curly red hair catching the sunlight as she exchanged cheerful waves with familiar faces. Jonas was already out, organizing a few stray decorations from the festival, his silver-streaked hair shining like a beacon of steadfast tradition. Their presence was a comforting reminder that this town, our town, was more than just a place. It was a community bound by shared light and shared stories. Ethan settled beside me on the porch, the wooden boards cool beneath us. We watched as the town slowly awoke, the glow of each person a testament to the resilience we all carried inside. The night's confessions and heartfelt moments had left us changed, our hearts no longer shadowed by fear, but illuminated by trust. "Last night was something," Ethan murmured, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my own glow pulse brighter. "It was," I agreed, feeling the weight of unspoken words lift between us. "I think it's the first time in a long while that I felt truly seen." He nodded, a shy smile breaking through his usual reserve. Me too. I never thought I'd be able to open up like that, but with you, it felt safe. Like maybe the light inside me doesn't have to hide anymore. The words settled over us, a quiet vow spoken in the soft morning light. It was more than just a promise between two people. It was a reaffirmation of the town's message that even the faintest light can grow brilliant with care and trust. I reached out, taking Ethan's hand in mine, the contact sending a warm glow that spread through both of us. We have a journey ahead, I said, but I think we're ready to face it together. He squeezed my hand gently, together. As the sun rose higher, bathing the town in golden light, I felt a deep sense of peace settle within me. The weight of grief still lingered, but it no longer threatened to consume my glow. Instead, it became a part of the spectrum of colors that made my heart shine uniquely bright. This morning was a new beginning, not just for me or Ethan, but for all of us who called this town home. And as I looked out over the streets, alive with the soft pulse of countless hearts, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it with our hearts alight. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was ours to paint, stroke by stroke, glow by glow. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to create again. We sat there for a while longer, hand in hand, watching the town come alive with light and hope. There was something profoundly beautiful in the quiet moments after a storm, when everything felt possible again. "Coffee's good," I said with a small smile. Ethan chuckled softly. "Glad you think so. I might just make it our new morning ritual." I laughed, the sound light and free. I'd like that. And as the day stretched ahead, filled with endless possibilities, I knew this was just the beginning. The light within us was no longer fragile or tentative, it was steady, warm, and strong. Together, we would keep it glowing, no matter what shadows might come. The night of the festival might have ended, but our story was only unfolding, and with hearts alight, we were ready to shine brighter than ever before. The morning light filtered softly through the sheer curtains of my studio, casting a gentle glow over the scattered brushes and tubes of paint that littered the wooden table. It was a quiet kind of dawn, one that seemed to cradle the world in a hush of possibility. I stood before a large canvas, the surface alive with swirling colors that seemed to pulse with the same ethereal light that bathed the town at night. Each brushstroke was a delicate dance, a conversation between my heart and the memories that still lingered like shadows and warmth intertwined. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt a stirring inside me, a flicker of the creative flame that had once burned so brightly. The grief that had dulled my glow was no longer a weight pressing me into silence, but a subtle undercurrent that gave depth to the colors I laid down. Shades of deep indigo and soft amber blended with flashes of vibrant gold, mirroring the emotional spectrum I saw every evening when the town's hearts came alive in radiant light. I paused, stepping back to study the painting. It was imperfect, raw, and yet it held something precious, a testament to the journey I was on, from darkness toward a tentative light. Outside, the distant sound of children's laughter carried on the crisp autumn breeze, mingling with the rustle of fallen leaves. The world felt alive and full of quiet magic. Later that day, I found myself at Ethan's bookstore, a place that had become a sanctuary in its own right. The familiar scent of aged paper and cedarwood enveloped me as I stepped inside, a comforting balm to my restless mind. Ethan was there, seated by the fireplace, a worn book of poetry open on his lap. His dark hair caught the soft glow of the firelight, and his eyes, thoughtful and intense, lifted to meet mine with a warmth that had grown steadily over the weeks. He began to read, his voice low and steady, each word flowing like a gentle river over smooth stones. The poem spoke of loss and hope, of light found in unexpected places, and as I listened, I felt the dim pulse of his emotional glow flicker to life, quiet but undeniable. The room seemed to shrink around us, cocooning us in a shared moment of understanding and trust. For the first time, the distance between our guarded hearts felt less like a chasm and more like a bridge. Encouraged by this fragile connection, I invited a small circle of friends to Maggie's cafe that evening. The walls, adorned with local artwork and vibrant colors, seemed to hum with life. Among the familiar faces, Maggie's bright red curls and infectious smile were like a beacon of joy, her own glow radiant as ever. When I unveiled my latest paintings, the room fell into a hush, the air thick with appreciation and quiet awe. Each canvas was an attempt to capture the intangible, the way our emotions shimmered and danced in the night air, the interplay of grief and healing, the fragile beauty of second chances. As the guests murmured their praise, I felt a swell of warmth spread through me, a steady flame replacing the flickers of doubt. Maggie reached across the table, squeezing my hand with a fierce tenderness, her eyes shining with shared triumph. In the days that followed, I took long walks along the riverbank with Jonas. His silver-streaked hair caught the late afternoon sun as he spoke of the town's history and the mysterious origins of our emotional glow. The water mirrored the pastel sky, soft ripples whispering secrets as we wandered beneath the old oaks. Our conversations wove together the past and present, grounding me in a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I'd been craving. Through it all, Ethan was a constant presence, quiet, patient, and increasingly open. His glow, once a faint ember, now shimmered with a gentle amber light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my own. We shared moments of laughter and silence, poetry and paint, slowly unraveling the layers of fear and grief that had kept us apart. That night, as I sat alone in my studio, I gazed at the canvases lining the walls, each one a chapter of my healing story. The colors danced and shimmered, a visual symphony of light and shadow, loss and love. It was as if my soul was finally speaking out loud, in hues and textures that words alone could never capture. Outside, the town's emotional glow began to rise with the setting sun, a tapestry of radiant hearts illuminating the streets. I felt my own light steady and sure, a beacon shining not just for myself but for the fragile, beautiful community that had welcomed me back. And somewhere in the quiet hush of the evening, I knew this was only the beginning. But as the night deepened, a subtle nervousness stirred within me, a question without an answer. Would this renewed passion, this delicate light I was nurturing, be enough to face the challenges still ahead? The shadows of doubt, though softened, still lingered just beyond the glow. I set my brush down and looked out the window, the town alive with shimmering hearts and hopeful whispers. Tomorrow I would paint again. Tomorrow I would try to let my light shine even brighter. The warm light of Ethan's bookstore was a haven in the cool evening air, the scent of aged paper and fresh coffee mingling in the small space. Ethan sat on the worn wooden bench by the window, the phone cradled in his hand. His fingers trembled slightly, not from the chill, but from the weight of the moment. The dim glow of his emotional light flickered uncertainly, a reflection of the turmoil inside him. For years, that light had remained muted, shadowed by the loss of his sister Ella and the silence that followed. Tonight was different. Tonight, he was reaching out. Outside, Leela's presence was a quiet anchor. She stood just beyond the glass, her paint-stained clothes catching the soft lamplight. Her own glow, once dimmed by grief, now pulsed with a gentle steadiness. She watched Ethan's silhouette, every breath he took a testament to the courage it took to confront his past. Without a word, she sent him all the strength she could muster. Ethan's thumb hovered over the call button before he pressed it decisively. The line rang, each tone echoing through the quiet shop. When finally answered, a familiar yet distant voice greeted him, his mother. The years of silence hung thick between them, but Ethan's voice was steady, deliberate as he spoke. "Mum, it's me. I've been thinking a lot about Ella lately." There was a pause, a breath held across the miles and memories. Then, softly, his mother replied, her voice trembling with a mixture of surprise and relief. "Ethan, I didn't expect to hear from you. I've missed you." The conversation unfolded slowly, punctuated by pauses heavy with unspoken pain and shared loss. They spoke of Ella, the bright, youthful light who had been taken to Sunand, the grief that had fractured their family. Words that had once seemed impossible to say now bridged the gap, tentative but sincere. Ethan felt the flicker in his glow grow steadier, warmed by the fragile hope of reconciliation. Later, back in Lila's studio, the air was thick with the scent of oil paints and fresh canvas. They sat side by side, a quiet comfort settling between them as they shared a cup of tea. The mingling of their emotional lights created a soft, warm aura that filled the room, a tangible symbol of their growing bond. Lila looked at Ethan, her eyes reflecting the depth of her support. "You did something brave today," she said gently, reaching out like that's the first step toward healing. Ethan nodded, a tentative smile breaking through. "It's scary, but I want to try. For Ella, for myself, and for us." Their conversation drifted toward forgiveness and second chances, the themes that had come to define their journey. In the quiet intimacy of the moment, they found not only solace, but the promise of a future where their lights could shine uninhibited. As the night deepened, the town's luminescence outside their windows mirrored the transformation within. The emotional glow that had once seemed so fragile now burned with newfound strength. In that small studio, surrounded by colors and memories, Ethan and Leela took another step forward together. But even as hope blossomed, the shadows of doubt lingered at the edges, whispering questions of whether past wounds could ever truly fade. Yet, for the first time in a long while, those whispers were met with a resolute, lighter, shared determination to build bridges where once there were walls. The night was far from over, and their story was just beginning to unfold anew. The night had wrapped the quaint town in its familiar blanket of stars and glowing auras, the emotional light of its people casting a gentle shimmer over every rooftop and cobblestone street. Leela found herself once again drawn to the quiet refuge of the wooden bench overlooking the heart of the town, the same spot where she and Ethan had shared so many small, unspoken moments before. Tonight, the air was cool with a hint of early autumn, carrying a faint scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke that settled softly around them. Ethan sat beside her, his presence calm, steady. Neither spoke at first, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them, filled only by the soft hum of the town's collective glow and the occasional rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. Their shadows merged beneath them, long and dark, a contrast to the light that flickered faintly from their chests. It was a light that had once been so dim, so guarded, but now it pulsed with a quiet resilience, tentative yet growing. "I've been thinking," Ethan finally broke the silence, his voice low and careful, "about how much easier it is to hide in the shadows. Sometimes it feels safer not to let anyone see the cracks, but I'm learning. Maybe the cracks are where the light comes in." Leela turned to him, catching the flicker of vulnerability in his thoughtful eyes. "I know what you mean. she said softly. It's terrifying to open up, especially when you've been hurt. But I've realized that if I don't try, I'll never move past the grief or find joy again. Their hands found each other's, fingers intertwining naturally, grounding them in the moment. The dim glow between them brightened just a fraction, as if their shared courage fed the light. Later, in the cozy warmth of Ethan's bookstore, the walls lined with well-worn spines and quiet memories. The lamplight threw soft pools of gold across the room. Ethan pulled a small book of poetry from a shelf and began reading aloud, his voice steady and rich with gentle emotion. Leela listened, letting the words wash over her poems of hope, loss, and renewal, each line a thread, weaving them closer together. "The wound is the place where the light enters you," Ethan quoted, his eyes meeting hers. "Rumi, it feels like that sometimes, doesn't it? Like our pain is part of what lets us feel deeply, love fiercely." Lila nodded, a tear slipping free despite her efforts to hold it back. "I want to believe that. I want to paint that truth. But some days, it's hard to find the courage." Back in her studio, surrounded by canvases that bore the marks of her struggle, Leela wrestled with the brush in her hand. The blank space before her was both a challenge and an invitation. Every stroke of paint felt like a battle between the shadows of her grief and the flickering hope she was learning to nurture. She thought of Ethan's words, the quiet strength she saw in him despite his own fears. And slowly, she dipped the brush into the color, beginning to create again. Outside, a soft rain began to fall, tapping gently against the window panes. Inside, the world felt small and safe. Leela and Ethan sat close, their hands clasped tightly as the rhythmic sound of the rain became a steady heartbeat for the night. They talked about their fears, their setbacks, the moments when doubt crept in unbidden, and yet, in that shared space of honesty and trust, the shadows seemed less daunting, a part of the tapestry rather than a barrier to their light. "We don't have to be perfect," Leela whispered. "Maybe it's enough that we're trying, together." Ethan smiled, the glow from his chest flaring softly in response. "Together," he echoed. As the night deepened, the town's glow around them flickered like a living thing, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could be found, nurtured, and shared. And for Leela and Ethan, it was in these shared shadows that their brightest hopes began to take shape. But even as comfort settled over them, an unspoken question lingered in the air. How much of their past pain could they truly leave behind? And what new challenges awaited them as they stepped into the light of their growing love? The answer, like the town's glow, was waiting to be discovered, one flicker at a time. The morning light filtered softly through the tall windows of my studio, casting gentle shadows over the scattered canvases and tubes of paint that littered the floor. I stood in front of the easel, brush poised in hand, staring at the blank canvas as if it held the answers to questions I had been too afraid to ask. For so long, grief had been the weight anchoring me to a place of quiet numbness, a dimming of that once radiant emotional glow that the town's nights so vividly displayed. But today felt different. Today, I was ready to face the shadows. I dipped the brush into a pool of deep blue, the color of twilight and sorrow, and laid the first stroke across the canvas. It was heavy, deliberate, a confession in pigment. Memories of Grace whispered through my mind, his laughter, the curve of his smile, the suddenness of his absence. Each stroke was a step closer to that delicate balance between holding on and letting go. Around me, the studio seemed to breathe with me, the familiar scent of oil paint and turpentine mingling with the crisp morning air. Hours passed, though I scarcely noticed. The colors began to shift. The dark blues softened into warm ambers and golds, hues that spoke of hope and healing. My hand moved with new purpose, guided by a quiet determination that surprised me. The glow I felt inside was steady now, no longer flickering with doubt or fear, but grounded in peaceful acceptance. This painting was not just a piece of art. It was my manifesto, my way of telling the world and myself that I was ready to live again. Later, I found myself in Maggie's cafe, the comforting clatter of cups and the rich aroma of coffee wrapping around us like a familiar embrace. Maggie's bright red curls bounced as she smiled, her eyes shining with encouragement. "You look different," she said, her voice warm, "like you found a piece of yourself you thought was lost." I laughed softly, feeling a lightness I hadn't known in a long time. "I'm learning to paint my grief instead of running from it." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "That's brave, Lila, and it shows. Your glow, it's steady, it's real." Her words settled in me like a gentle tide, washing away the lingering doubts. For the first time in months, I felt connected, not just to Maggie and the community, but to myself. That evening, Ethan and I walked together along the softly glowing streets of the town. The familiar lights shimmered around us, casting a warm glow that felt like a tangible thread weaving us closer. Our hands brushed, a small spark that sent a comforting warmth through me. We talked not about the past pain that had haunted us, but about the future, tentative and uncertain, but full of possibility. "I'm afraid sometimes," Ethan admitted quietly, his voice barely above the rustling leaves. "Afraid that opening up means risking everything I've tried to protect." I nodded, feeling my own fears mirrored in his. "But maybe it's worth the risk. Maybe that's how we find the light again." His eyes met mine, a flicker of something unspoken glowing there. In that moment, the town's lights seemed to pulse in time with our hearts, a silent promise of second chances. Later that night, I stepped onto the porch, the cool air wrapping around me as I looked out over the town bathed in its nightly glow. The emotional lights flickered gently, townspeople's hearts shining in myriad colors. I breathed deeply, feeling the warmth within myself, a glow no longer fragile or uncertain, but steady and sure. I thought of Grace, of all I had lost and all I still had to gain. The painting waiting in my studio was more than a work of art. It was a testament to the power of letting go while holding close the memories that shape us. I was ready to live fully again, to love, to create, to shine. And as the night deepened, with the town's lights like stars fall into earth, I whispered to the darkness, "I am here, I am ready." The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt the steady warmth of hope glowing within me, a light that would not be extinguished. I turned back inside, the door closing softly behind me, ready to face whatever dawn might bring. The subtle chime of the bookstore's bell echoed as Ethan stepped inside, the familiar scent of aged paper and polished wood wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. Tonight, the shop was quiet, but for a small gathering of familiar faces, invited by Maggie to share in a moment of warmth and connection. Ethan's heart pulsed gently, the light within him a soft amber glow that seemed to flicker with nervous anticipation. He cleared his throat softly, feeling the weight of eyes on him, not with judgment, but with expectation and kindness. Taking a deep breath, Ethan reached for a slim volume of poetry resting on the counter. The words within had long been a refuge, a way to express what he often found hard to speak aloud. As he began to read, his voice steady but tender, the light in his chest began to grow, a steady flame replacing the hesitant flicker it had been for so long. "Even in the shadows, there's a light that never dies," he recited, the poetry resonating deeply with the emotions he had kept locked away. Each stanza revealed pieces of his guarded soul, the loss of Ella, his fears of opening up, the loneliness that had dimmed his glow for years. But here, surrounded by friends who understood, his light was no longer a faint whisper. It was a beacon. Lila sat nearby, her eyes fixed on Ethan with a blend of admiration and something softer hope. Her own glow, which had wavered through months of grief, pulsed a little stronger in response to his vulnerability. The rain pattering gently against the window pane mingled with the quiet murmur of voices, creating a cocoon of intimacy within the bookstore's walls. After the reading, Maggie poured warm tea for everyone, the rich aroma filling the air as conversations blossomed. Ethan shared stories he'd never voiced before, the small moments of joy he found in books, the ache of missing his sister, and the cautious hope he held for the future. Each confession seemed to lighten the burden he carried, and his glow blossomed into a radiant golden light that filled the room with warmth. The gathering lingered late into the evening, the community's collective light weaving a tapestry of resilience and healing. Ethan's transformation was palpable, not just in the brightness of his glow, but in the ease with which he laughed and connected. It was a moment of triumph, a step forward forged through courage. As the crowd thinned, Lila and Ethan stepped out into the cool night. The stars stretched endlessly above, their lights mingling with the town's gentle glow. They walked side by side, their hands brushing occasionally, weaving a silent promise of trust and companionship. Their intertwined lights cast soft shadows on the cobblestones, a testament to the journey they'd begun together. "Your light," Lila whispered. "It's beautiful tonight." Ethan smiled, the warmth in his eyes mirroring the glow between them. "It's because of you, because I'm not afraid anymore." The night held a gentle promise of new beginnings, shared strength, and the luminous power of opening one's heart. For Ethan, this was more than just a brightening light. It was a rebirth. And as they disappeared into the quiet streets, bathed in the town's gentle glow, it was clear that even the faintest light, when nurtured with care and trust, could become brilliant indeed. The warm glow of Maggie's cafe was a sanctuary in itself, the kind of place that wrapped you in comfort the moment you stepped through its door. Tonight, it felt more alive than ever, the soft jazz weaving through the air like a familiar lullaby. I found myself nestled in one of the well-worn armchairs, my chestnut hair loosely pinned back, paint stains still faint on my sleeves. Maggie sat across from me, her curly red hair catching the amber light, her smile bright enough to rival the glow of the town's most radiant hearts. It had been weeks since I'd last felt this kind of ease, this sense that maybe, just maybe, the weight of grief didn't have to be a permanent shroud. Maggie's own glow flickered beside mine, soft, warm, and steadily growing. She had invited me here not only to reconnect, but to share something deeply personal, something that, in its honesty, might hold a mirror to my own struggles. "Lila," Maggie began, her voice gentle but steady, "I haven't told many people this, but my breakup, it tore me apart more than I expected. For a long time, I felt like my light just went out, like I was this dim shadow of myself, afraid to feel too much or too little." I watched her fingers trace the rim of her coffee cup, her glow flickering like a candle in a breeze. "It was hard," she continued, "but what helped me was realizing I didn't have to hide. I could let the pain be there and still find space for joy. It wasn't easy, but every small flicker of light counted." Her words wrapped around me like a bomb, stirring feelings I'd buried deep beneath layers of sorrow. I thought about Grace, his laughter, his warmth, the way our love had painted my world in colors I never wanted to lose. And yet, Here was Maggie, shining despite the cracks in her own heart. "How did you do it?" I asked softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Maggie's eyes sparkled with a mixture of vulnerability and strength. By leaning into the people who cared, by letting myself be seen, even when it was scary. This town, our community, it's filled with people who understand. We hold each other up. As the evening deepened, more familiar faces drifted into the cafe, their glows mingling and building into a collective warmth that filled the room with hope. I watched as Maggie moved among them, her laughter ringing out, a beacon of resilience. It was as if the walls themselves breathed in the light of shared healing. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the night outside had settled into a watercolor wash of blues and purples, Maggie took my hands in hers. Our glows intertwined, a quiet promise hanging between us. "You're not alone, Leela," she said softly. "We're in this together." Her words settled deep in my chest, a seed of something new taking root of fragile but fierce hope. Maybe, just maybe, the dawn of my own renewal was on the horizon, waiting to paint my heart in vibrant hues once more. As I left the cafe that night, the cool air kissed my cheeks, and I looked up to see the town's emotional lights pulsing gently in the darkness. For the first time in a long time, my own glow felt like it might flicker back to life, steady, warm, and ready to shine again. But even as the promise of healing whispered through the night, I knew the journey was far from over. There were still shadows to face, fears to confront, and the fragile dance of vulnerability to master. Yet with Maggie's friendship and the strength of our community, I felt prepared to step into whatever came next, heart alight with the possibility of new beginnings. The night wrapped around me like a soft embrace, carrying the scent of rain and hope. And as I walked home beneath the stars, I couldn't help but wonder, could I truly learn to glow again? Not despite my grief, but because of it. The answer, I sensed, was waiting in the light we shared and in the courage to be seen. Just as I was about to close my door, a gentle knock stopped me. It was Ethan, standing quietly in the glow of the porch light, his dim light flickering faintly brighter as our eyes met. "Mind if I come in?" he asked, voice low but steady. In that moment, the shadows didn't seem quite so dark anymore, and I knew that whatever lay ahead, we would face it together, two flickering lights ready to burn brighter, side by side. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and polished wood as Jonas Reed pushed open the heavy oak door to the town hall's archives. Dust motes floated lazily in the narrow shafts of sunlight that pierced through the small, grimy windows, casting a soft golden haze over rows of filing cabinets and shelves burdened with leather-bound volumes. Lila followed closely behind, her chestnut hair catching the light, while Ethan's muted glow shimmered faintly in the dim space, his dark eyes reflecting the flickering light. "I've been meaning to show you both this," Jonas said, his voice low and reverent. "It's a manuscript I found hidden among some old town records last week. No one's seen it in decades." Curiosity pried at Leela's heart, urging her forward as they gathered around a battered wooden table. Jonas carefully removed the fragile book, its cover cracked and faded, pages yellowed with age. The manuscript bore the town's old seal, a glowing heart entwined with delicate vines, symbolizing the intertwining of emotion and community that had defined their home for generations. "This," Jonas began, "is an account of the original ritual that the founders of our town celebrated, a ceremony, embracing emotional vulnerability as a path to healing and connection." Leela traced the delicate script with her fingertips, each word evoking images of gatherings where townsfolk would share their fears and joys beneath the night sky, their hearts glowing brighter with each honest confession. The ritual, as described, was a sacred act of trust, designed to bind the community together through shared light and shadow. Ethan leaned closer, his eyes narrowed thoughtfully. It's like this glow we see every night isn't just a quirk of the town. It's part of a deeper tradition, something that's been passed down. His voice was soft, but there was a flicker of light in his tone that hadn't been there before. Exactly, Jonas replied. And understanding that history, I think, can help us all appreciate how important it is to keep this openness alive, not just in the festival, but every day. For a long moment, the three sat in silence, the only sound the gentle rustling of the manuscript's pages as they turned them carefully. The weight of the past settled around them, mingling with the fragile hope of the present. Lila's heart, once heavy and dim, felt a tentative warmth spreading through it, as if the echoes of those ancient ceremonies were breathing new life into her own glow. Outside the archives, the sky deepened into hues of amber and rose as the sun dipped low behind the hills. The town's lights began to flicker awake, soft pulses of emotion illuminating windows and doorways, a living tapestry of shared experience. It was as if the legacy Jonas had uncovered was awakening alongside them, weaving their stories into the larger narrative of their community. Lila looked to Ethan, their gazes meeting in a quiet understanding. The past, with all its pain and beauty, was no longer just a memory. It was a guide, a beacon inviting them to step forward, to trust, and to shine brighter together. We should share this, Lila said finally, her voice steady with newfound purpose. With everyone, it could change how we see ourselves and each other. Jonas nodded, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. And that's exactly why I wanted you here. This is more than history. It's a reminder that even the faintest light can grow brilliant with care and trust. As they closed the manuscript and prepared to leave the archives, the evening air greeted them, cool and comforting. The town's glow pulsed stronger, as if welcoming the revival of an ancient truth. That healing was not a solitary journey, but a communal dance of light and shadow, each heart a vital thread in the tapestry of life. With this revelation, Lila felt a surge of hope, an ember rekindled within her soul. The festival was coming, and this year it would shine brighter than ever before. Together they would honor the past, embrace the present, and illuminate the path forward, with hearts alight. The evening air was crisp, but welcoming as the townspeople trickled into Maggie's cafe, each carrying their own shimmering light that painted the room with hues of hope and healing. The familiar creak of the wooden door was accompanied by laughter and greetings, a symphony of voices blending seamlessly with the soft jazz playing in the background. Maggie's cafe, usually a quaint refuge during the day, now pulsed with an energy that was both electric and tender, a perfect stage for the night's celebration. Lila stood near the entrance, her chestnut hair catching the warm glow of the overhead string lights. Her eyes, expressive and bright, scanned the room as she felt the gentle pulse of her own emotional light, now steady and warm, a stark contrast to the dimness that had haunted her since Grace's passing. The paint stains on her worn clothes seemed almost to shimmer in the soft illumination, a testament to her rekindled passion. Ethan was already there, leaning against the far wall beside the rows of bookshelves he so carefully curated. The quiet intensity in his thoughtful eyes met Lila's gaze, and she saw his glower, soft, golden hue flicker and grow stronger as their eyes locked. His dark hair tousled slightly, and the cozy sweater he wore seemed to envelop him in a comforting embrace, much like the one he had offered her these past weeks. Maggie bustled through the room, her curly red hair bouncing with each step, her bright smile contagious. She moved from group to group, offering warm embraces and heartfelt words that seemed to ignite the emotional light in everyone she touched. Sammy, her younger brother, darted around with youthful enthusiasm, his glow a vibrant blue that seemed to pulse with the promise of the future. Jonas Reed took his place near the fireplace, adjusting his glasses as the room gradually quieted in anticipation. His silver-streaked hair caught the light as he began to speak, weaving tales of the town's history steeped in the magic of emotional light. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of generations, and the listeners' glows responded in kind, pulsing rhythmically as if in unison with the story. Leela found herself drawn to Ethan, and together they moved toward a window that framed the moonlit town outside. Their glows mingled, casting gentle hues of amber and rose across their faces. "I never imagined this night," Lila whispered, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, "that we'd all be here, sharing this light." Ethan smiled, a rare softness touching his features. "Neither did I, but maybe that's what this town does brings light to the spaces we thought were forever dark." Their hands brushed, sending a ripple through their intertwined glows that warmed them from within. Around them, laughter bubbled up again as Maggie and Sammy led a spontaneous song, their voices blending with the gentle clinking of glasses and the soft rustle of pages from Ethan's books. As the night deepened, stories were shared of loss, of hope, of second chances. Each confession was met with understanding and light, the emotional auras weaving together into a tapestry that spoke of resilience and connection. Leela's heart felt fuller than it had in years, buoyed by the knowledge that she was not alone. The gathering began to wind down, but the warmth lingered, a promise etched into the very air. Standing beside Ethan, Leela looked round at the faces illuminated not just by the cafe's lights, but by the undeniable glow of shared healing. "This is a night to remember," she said softly, a smile breaking through the last shadows of her grief. Ethan nodded, his eyes shining as brightly as the town's collective light. "And just the beginning." Outside, the stars twinkled as if in agreement. The night itself, holding its breath in reverence for the fragile, brilliant light nurtured within this small, luminous town. And as the dawn approached, the promise of a new day shimmered like a beacon, one that would carry Lila, Ethan, and their community forward, together with hearts alight. The evening's warmth settled deep into Leela's bones as she stepped out into the cool night air. The soft glow of the cafe fading behind her, but the feeling of connection glowing brighter than ever within her. Her steps were lighter, each one carrying her further from the shadows of grief and closer to the light of possibility. The town around her hummed with gentle radiance, a living reminder that even the faintest spark, when nurtured with care and trust, could blaze into something truly magnificent. "Come back inside," Ethan's voice called softly from the doorway. Lila paused, then turned with a smile that reached her eyes. "I think I will." Together, they walked back into the heart of the light, ready to face whatever the future held, united, hopeful, and illuminated by the night to remember. The sky above the quaint town was a canvas of fading twilight, soft hues of lavender and rose bleeding into the deepening blue of evening. Leela and Ethan found themselves once again perched on the familiar wooden bench overlooking the heart of the town, where the gentle glow of emotional lights shimmered like a constellation come alive. Their auras, once solitary and muted, now pulsed in gentle synchrony, weaving a tapestry of light that felt both fragile and fiercely alive. Lila's chestnut hair caught the last rays of sun, strands dancing in the light breeze as she glanced sideways at Ethan. His dark eyes met hers, a quiet intensity glowing in their depths, mirroring the warmth beginning to unfurl within her own heart. It felt surreal, this shared rhythm of light and feeling, a reminder that even after so much grief and shadow, connection could still spark brilliance. You ever think about how much light we all carry inside us? Ethan's voice was low, almost a whisper that mingled with the evening air. Sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's blinding, and sometimes it just needs someone else to help it shine brighter. Leela smiled softly, the first genuine one in days. I think I'm starting to understand that. That maybe light isn't just something we have to find alone. Earlier that afternoon, nestled amid the comforting scent of old paper and polished wood, Ethan had read a poem aloud in his bookstore. His voice, steady and warm, wrapped around Lila like a soft blanket. The words spoke of loss and hope, shadows and illumination, and as she listened, she felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. The dim glow that had long hovered uncertainly around her flickered with new life. They had stayed long after the last customer left, the silence between them comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. Ethan's eyes had flicked to hers more than once, a subtle invitation that Lila found herself eager to accept. Now, under the vast expanse of the starlit sky, a small fire crackled outside Lila's studio. The warmth of the flames mingled with the gentle hum of the town's nightglow, creating a cocoon of serenity and possibility. They shared stories and dreams, their voices weaving together like threads of gold and silver in the night. Lila spoke of her hopes to capture the town's emotional light in her paintings, to translate the intangible into color and form. Ethan shared memories of his sister, Ella, the pain her loss had etched into his soul, and how facing that grief had led him here, to this moment, to her. Their hands found each other in the flickering firelight, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. The combined glow of their hearts brightened noticeably, casting a golden hue over their faces. It was a light born of trust, of shared vulnerability, and the quiet promise of new beginnings. Together, Ethan murmured, we can shine brighter than either of us ever could alone. Leela nodded, her heart swelling with an emotion that was part relief, part exhilaration. Then let's not be afraid to let that light grow. As the night deepened, the town's gentle glow seemed to pulse in harmony with their joined light, the beacon of hope in the darkness, a testament to the power of connection and healing. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Leela felt ready to walk it with Ethan's hand in hers, and their hearts alight. Their story was no longer one of solitary grief, but of shared strength and radiant possibility. And as the stars blinked softly overhead, the promise of tomorrow shimmered just within reach. And yet, beneath that hopeful glow, an unspoken question lingered in the quiet night air. How far would they be willing to go to protect this fragile light they had found? The answer, as always, would be written in the coming days, one glowing heartbeat at a time. The porch creaked softly beneath us as we settled into the worn wooden chairs. The night sky sprawled above like an endless tapestry of twinkling stars. The town was quiet now, the gentle hum of distant laughter and the faint scent of jasmine weaving through the cool air. I glanced over at Ethan, his dark eyes reflecting the starlight, a soft glow pulsing faintly around him, brighter than before, but still subdued, like a candle fighting the breeze. It's peaceful out here, I breathed, feeling the weight of the day ease just a little. Sometimes I forget how quiet the night can be when you're not chasing shadows. He offered a small smile, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes but was honest all the same. I think the quiet helps us hear what we're really feeling. At least, that's what I hope. I nodded, my chest tightening with the honesty of that hope. It was strange, this dance we'd been doing to people with glowing hearts, trying to navigate the fragile light of second chances. "Do you think we're ready?" I asked softly. "Ready to face what's next?" Ethan's gaze dropped to the interlaced fingers resting between us, his dim glow flickering uncertainly. "I don't know if anyone's ever truly ready for the future, Lila, but maybe what matters is who we choose to face it with." The words settled around me, warm and steady, like a promise. I squeezed his hand, feeling the faint pulse of his light mingle with mine. "I want to try," I said. "Not just to try to heal, but to live, to really live." He nodded, and the silence that followed was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. We moved inside to his bookstore, the familiar scent of old paper and polished wood wrapping around us like a bomb. The amber glow of the lamps cast gentle shadows across the shelves, creating a quiet sanctuary from the world outside. Ethan pulled out a worn volume of poetry, flipping through the pages until he found a passage he wanted to share. His voice was low and steady as he read, the words echoing softly between us, weaving threads of hope and longing through the still air. As he spoke, I felt my own glow pulse, not with sorrow, but with something lighter, something that resembled hope. The past was always there, a shadow at the edge of my light, but tonight it felt less like a burden and more like a part of the whole. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden below. The fragrance stirred memories of Grace, the softness of her smile, the warmth of her touch. I swallowed hard, sharing pieces of my story with Ethan, the ache of loss, the struggle to create, the fragile flicker of hope that had brought me home. He listened with quiet intensity, never rushing, never judging. When I finished, he offered his own truths, the weight of his sister Ella's absence, the fear of losing those he cared about, the slow journey toward opening his heart. For a moment, it felt as if the entire world had shrunk to the two of us, our combined light pushing back the darkness that lingered just beyond the window pane. Then, almost hesitantly, Ethan reached out, his hand covering mine. Our glows brightened, a warm radiance that filled the room and seemed to touch every corner of my soul. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together." I smiled through tears, the weight of fear lifting just enough to let in the possibility of joy. Together, I agreed. Outside, the stars continued to shine, silent witnesses to the fragile, brilliant light. We had found a light born not from perfection, but from the courage to embrace the unknown with open hearts. And as the night deepened, so did our promise to face the future, not alone, but hand in hand. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid to walk it. Not with Ethan by my side, and not with the light of hope burning steadily within me. As we sat there, wrapped in the quiet glow of our newfound connection, the night whispered its ancient song, a reminder that even in darkness, the faintest light could grow brilliant, if only nurtured with trust and love. And so, with hearts alight and spirits intertwined, we stepped toward the future, ready to meet whatever awaited us with open eyes and open hearts. The porch light flickered softly, a quiet beacon in the night, a symbol of the journey we had begun, and the love that would guide us through the shadows yet to come. But as dawn approached, and the first pale light crept over the horizon, I couldn't help but wonder what new challenges awaited us in the days ahead. How would our fragile light hold up against the storms to come? Only time would tell. But for now, in this moment, suspended between night and day, hope was our brightest flame. And that was enough. The evening settled round me like a soft cloak, the fading light outside the window casting long shadows across my studio floor. I sat by the pane, brush in hand, but still, my gaze drifting beyond the glass to the familiar streets of our town. The quaint homes and cozy cafes began to shimmer with their nightly glow, the emotional light that made this place like no other. Each flicker and pulse told a story, a laugh shared, a sorrow borne, a hope kindled. I watched, feeling the warmth of those stories, even as my own glow remained a gentle, uneven pulse. For so long, I had feared my light would never fully return. The grief had wrapped itself around my heart like a dense fog, muting the colors I once knew so well. But tonight felt different. There was a quietness inside me, not emptiness, but a space where something fragile yet real was taking root. Vulnerability, I realized, was not the enemy. It was the source of my glow. Turning from the window, I looked at the canvases that lined the walls, some half-finished, others abandoned in moments of doubt. Each bore witness to a chapter of my healing, the strokes capturing light and shadow alike. I traced a finger lightly over one painting, a night scene swirling with blues and golds, the town alive with luminescence. It was imperfect, raw, and yet it held a truth I had only begun to understand. My phone buzzed softly on the table, a message from Ethan lighting the screen. "Bookstore's quiet tonight. Come by if you want some company." A small smile tugged at my lips. His glow, once a faint flicker, had begun to shine brighter these past weeks, a beacon coaxed out by trust and shared pain. At the bookstore, the familiar scent of old paper and polished wood enveloped me. Ethan looked up from the worn poetry book in his hands, eyes warm and inviting. His sweater was threadbare at the cuffs, but the softness of his presence wrapped around me like a bomb. We settled into a nook between tall shelves, the dim light casting soft halos around us. Our conversation was quiet but earnest, words weaving a tapestry of mutual understanding. Ethan read aloud a few lines from Rilke, his voice steady and rich with feeling. The sound seemed to brighten the space between us, his emotional light mingling with mine in a gentle glow that felt like coming home. As the night deepened, I found myself speaking more freely than I had in months, sharing fears and hopes tangled with the memories of grace. Ethan listened without judgment, his own vulnerabilities unfolding in the spaces between our words. It was in this shared openness that I truly felt the glow within me alive, flickering, yet no longer fragile. Walking home under the vast, star-studded sky, the town's emotional lights shimmered like a sea of tiny lanterns, each a testament to resilience and connection. I paused beneath the ancient oak tree in the square, the branches stretching wide above me, leaves whispering softly in the evening breeze. Ethan joined me, his hand finding mine, fingers intertwining naturally. Our lights danced together, a warm blend of amber and soft blue, a visual symphony of the journey we'd traveled from isolation to intimacy, from fear to hope. In that moment, I understood that the glow within was not a fixed flame, but a living thing, shaped by love, loss, and the courage to be seen. The night hummed with possibility, the promise that even amidst shadows, light could grow brighter. And as we stood there, hearts alight and unguarded, I knew that my story was no longer defined by grief alone, but by the strength of embracing who I was, imperfect, vulnerable, and beautifully alive. Tomorrow would come with its challenges, but for now, beneath the gentle glow of our town and each other, I was home, and in that glow I found the courage to keep shining. The journey was far from over, but the light within me was steading ready to face whatever dawn would bring. The night wrapped the town in a velvet quiet, the kind that came just after the last hum of day faded, and before the festival's first lights kindled. Leela found herself wandering toward the town square, drawn by the soft flicker of street lamps, and the gentle pulse of emotional glows around her. Ethan was already there, seated on the weathered bench beneath the old oak tree. His figure cast in a muted light that somehow still pulled her in. She hesitated a moment before settling beside him, the familiar creak of the wood beneath them grounding her in the present. Their auras, usually so vivid in others, were delicate here, fragile threads of light weaving between them. A cool breeze stirred the amber leaves around their feet, whispering secrets of seasons past. "It's quieter than I expected," Leela murmured, her voice barely above the rustling leaves. Ethan glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Sometimes the quiet holds the loudest thoughts." She nodded, feeling the weight of unspoken words settle between them like a shared breath. "I still have moments when the grief feels like a shadow I can't shake. Like it's a part of me I'm afraid to let go of, even when it dims my light." His eyes searched hers, understanding etched in the depths. "I know, I've lived with that shadow for so long, I sometimes forget what light feels like without it." The honesty in his tone was a bomb, and Lila felt her own glow pulse gently in response, a hesitant ember beginning to catch flame. "Do you think we can really leave the shadows behind? Or do they just become part of who we are?" Ethan reached out, his hand brushing against hers, warm and steady. "Maybe it's not about leaving them behind, but learning to carry them differently, letting them shape our light instead of extinguish it." The words resonated deeply. Lila squeezed his hand, feeling a fragile hope take root. "I want to try with you." A soft smile blossomed on Ethan's face, his dim glow brightening just enough to warm her heart. "Then let's face the light and shadow together." Later, in the quiet sanctuary of his bookstore, Ethan shared a poem he'd found, a piece about loss and the slow bloom of new beginnings. His voice was steady but carried the weight of his past, and Lila listened, tears glistening in her eyes as the words wrapped around her like a tender embrace. "Do you think the light can really grow after it's been so dark?" she asked softly. He looked at her, his gaze steady and sure. "It does, because it's not about how bright the light was before, it's about how fiercely it burns now." The moment lingered, and when Maggie joined them later at the cafe, her laughter and vibrant glow brought a warmth that filled the room. "You too look like you've been through the fire and come out glowing," she teased gently. "Remember, it's okay to lean on each other. That's how we grow stronger." Lila smiled, feeling the truth in her friend's words seep into her bones. The path ahead wouldn't be without shadows, but with Ethan by her side, the light felt possible again. As they walked hand in hand beneath the glowing street lamps, their hearts beat in quiet harmony. The night was filled with promise, the promise that even amidst light and shadow, love could carve a way forward. And as they disappeared into the soft luminescence of their town, it was clear that their journey was just beginning. The night held its breath, waiting for the dawn. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine and the soft hum of distant laughter. As dusk deepened into darkness, the quaint town seemed to awaken in a new Witt Street. Homes and hearts glowing softly, radiating a warm, ethereal light that pulsed gently like the breath of the community itself. Lila stepped into the town square, her chestnut hair catching the glow of lanterns strung overhead and the myriad emotional lights shimmering from every person gathered. Her own glow, once so dim and flickering uncertainly, now shone with a steady warmth, a testament to the journey she had traveled. She felt Ethan's hand slip into hers, his touch grounding and familiar, his own light beside hers brighter than she'd ever seen. The square was alive with quiet celebration. Lanterns, each a delicate vessel of hopes and healing, were released into the night, floating upwards like stars being born anew. The townspeople's faces were serene yet vibrant, their emotional glows weaving together into a tapestry of color and light that seemed to breathe with life. This was more than a festival. It was a shared ritual of resilience, a collective embrace of both shadow and illumination. Leela looked around and saw Maggie at the cafe steps, her curly red hair haloed by the soft glow of her recovering light. Maggie's laughter rang clear and bright, drawing a small circle of friends into stories of heartbreak and hope. Nearby, Jonas stood by the ancient oak, his silver-streaked hair catching the lamplight as he spoke in quiet tones to Sammy, whose youthful eyes sparkled with wonder. The older man's words seemed to pass on more than history, they passed on a legacy of emotional courage. Taking a deep breath, Lila turned her gaze back to Ethan. The bookstore owner's thoughtful eyes met hers, his glow now a rich, steady flame rather than a shy flicker. "It's beautiful," he murmured, voice low and steady, "how we all shine together." She nodded, squeezing his hand. "I used to be afraid of this light, of letting it show of what it meant to be vulnerable. But now I see it's our greatest strength." Ethan smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. "And it's not just about shining alone. It's about what happens when our lights touch, when they merge." They moved closer beneath the ancient oak, their intertwined hands sending ripples of color across the cobblestones. Around them, the town's glow pulsed in harmony, a living reflection of the connections that had formed, the wounds that had healed, and the hope that had been rekindled. Maggie approached, her eyes bright and her aura vivid. "Look at us," she said, voice filled with wonder, a whole town lighting up the night. "It's like the darkness isn't as scary anymore." Jonas joined them, his gaze sweeping the gathering crowd. "This glow we've always known, it was special. But tonight, it feels like it's telling a new story, one of acceptance and second chances." Sammy, standing nearby with wide eyes, asked, "Will it always be this way? Can we keep this light alive, even when things get hard?" Lila knelt to his level, her smile gentle. "That's the promise we make to each other, to keep our hearts open, to share our light no matter what. Because even the faintest light can grow brilliant with care and trust." The night deepened, but the town's glow never waned. Instead, it grew richer, fuller, as if fed by every shared story, every healed wound, every brave step toward love. Lila felt her heart swell with a hopeful serenity she hadn't known in years. The shadows of grief still whispered, but they no longer held power over her light. As the festival drew to a close, the crowd slowly dispersed, each person carrying a spark of that collective warmth back into their homes and lives. Leela and Ethan lingered a moment longer beneath the oak, their lights mingling in a dance of color and promise. "What comes next?" Ethan asked softly. "Whatever we choose to make it," Leela replied, eyes shining with quiet certainty. Together, and with that, the night embraced them, their hearts alight, their futures glowing bright with possibility. The town had not just embraced the night. It had embraced the light within each of them, illuminating a path forward where love and healing could flourish endlessly. But as the last lanterns faded into the sky, a gentle breeze whispered through the streets, carrying with it a question that lingered like a soft shadow. How far would their lights reach, and what new challenges awaited in the unfolding dawn? The night was theirs to hold, but the journey ahead was only just beginning. The night was alive with a gentle hummer symphony of whispered conversations and soft laughter, mingling beneath a sky embroidered with countless stars. The town square, once quiet and shadowed, now pulsed with radiant light, an ethereal glow that wrapped the gathered crowd in warmth and wonder. At the heart of it all stood Lila and Ethan, their hands tentatively finding each other's, fingers intertwining with a familiarity that felt both new and deeply rooted. Leela's chestnut hair caught the flickering light of lanterns strung between the old oak trees. Her paint-stained blouse now brushed with vibrant hues that mirrored the festival's spirit. She felt the steady beat of her heart, each pulse sending ripples of soft luminescence through the air around her. Beside her, Ethan's dim glow, once so hesitant and fragile, now blossomed into a steady, brilliant light, beacon of hope and trust that reached out to hers and merged gently, brilliantly. Together, their lights intertwined, weaving a tapestry of colors that danced like fireflies in the night. The townspeople gathered close, their faces illuminated by the collective glow, smiles radiant and eyes bright with shared understanding. Maggie stood near the cafe soap in windows, raising a glass with a proud smile, her own fiery light shining strong after months of personal struggle. Sammy, youthful and eager, danced lightly at her side, his laughter ringing clear and bright, a reminder of new beginnings and the promise of growth. Jonas, the town's historian, stepped forward, his silver-streaked hair shimmering as he spoke with reverence. His voice carried the weight of generations, telling stories of the town's origins, the mysterious glow that had always been more than mere lighter, symbol of the human heart's capacity to feel and heal. The crowd listened, spellbound, as he spoke of resilience, love, and the courage to embrace vulnerability. Lila's gaze shifted to Ethan, meeting his thoughtful eyes with a mixture of tenderness and unspoken gratitude. "I never thought I'd find this again," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "The light, the hope, being able to trust that the darkness doesn't have to last forever." Ethan squeezed her hand gently, his smile shy but genuine. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But here we are, proof that even the faintest light can grow brilliant when nurtured." As the festival's final moments unfolded, Lila pulled a small sketchbook from her bag. Settling onto a nearby bench, she began to capture the scene, the swirling colors, the mingling of shadows and light, the faces that told stories of pain, healing, and love. Each stroke of her pencil was a testament to the journey they had taken. Through grief's cold shadow, the tentative steps toward vulnerability, and the radiant warmth of newfound connection. The night air was filled with a soft melody, the town's musicians weaving a lullaby that echoed the heartbeats of all present. Leela felt a tear slip down her cheek, not one of sorrow, but of profound peace and hope. The glow around her was no longer fragile. It was strong, resilient, a beacon that would guide her forward. "Thank you," she murmured to Ethan, her voice steady now, "for lighting the way." Ethan's eyes glistened. "And thank you for showing me how to shine." Together, with hearts alight, they stepped forward into the future, ready to face whatever darkness might come, knowing their light would never fade as long as they nurtured it with care and love. The town's glow enveloped them, a living testament to second chances and the enduring power of love. And as dawn crept softly over the horizon, casting a gentle blush across the sky, Lila and Ethan stood hand in hand, their lights shining brilliantly, promise of healing, hope, and a love that would never dim.